If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
What is the most frightening and creepiest thing you've ever encountered that you've never told anyone?
Creature my kids saw in the middle of the night. About 10 years ago, when my kids were little, they were reading a book under a blanket with a flashlight. They said they heard the floor creaking by their bedroom door, so they shined the flashlight towards it. They both saw a demon thing wearing a long black cloak with a pointy hat. It had red glowing eyes, skeleton hands, and was wearing a skeleton necklace. They also said it was as tall as the ceiling. They said the face was completely black, but you could only see the red eyes. Mind you, that night everyone slept in my room, lol. What's really spooky to me is they heard the floor creaking. So it had to be of a physical nature. They still talk about it to this day, so I know it wasn't made up. Okay, when my daughter was 2, she started talking about a man who lived in her closet. She said he would come out at night and wake her up and talk to her. He said he lived in a hole in her closet and would take children down there. She said he had black eyes. This went on for about a week with me trying to shrug it off. I really don't believe in the paranormal. But man, she was consistent. The whole thing ended when I woke up one night to her screaming bloody murder. I ran into her room, the other side of the house, and she told me the man with the black eyes said that I, her mother, was dead and would she come down the hole with the man. He said she had to say yes so he could take her. She said no, and whatever happened next, I could never get that out of her, made her start screaming and crying. When I got to her room, I will say that the closet door was wide open, and I shut it every night because of her nightmares. That freaked me out a bit too. I moved her into my room and wouldn't let her back into hers. We moved out of that house a month later anyway, so I just had her sleep with me from then on. She stopped talking about him. I wrote to several paranormal investigative groups to see what they would say. I never actually went back to check their answers because she stopped talking about it. Whether it was all in her head or not, it is the single creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. She's 7 now and still remembers him. So this happened to me back in 2011. I was 20 years old and was living with my grandpa and sister. My grandpa was in the hospital at the time, and during the week he was away, a lot of weird things would happen at home. So my sister and I would sleep in the living room. One night my sister went out with her friends and left me alone at the house. It was around midnight, and I decided to get some sleep since I had an early class the next morning. I'm afraid of the dark, and I cannot fall asleep without some sort of light, so I left the bathroom and kitchen lights on. At my house, it was enough to partially illuminate the living room. Well, I'm on the couch trying to fall asleep, and as I was lying there, I heard keys in the door. The front door opens, and in walks my mom, or at least the silhouette of my mom. I was surprised to see her because it was late and my mom lives about 30 miles outside the city. I asked her what she was doing there, and she told me she was going to spend the night and go to work from there in the morning. She sounded super irritated, and when I think about it, I couldn't see her face, only the outline of her body and her curly hair. Without my glasses or contacts, my vision sucks pretty bad, and it was somewhat dark in the living room. Anyways, she tells me she's going to shower and walks down the hall and closes the bathroom door. I'm thinking, okay, random, but whatever. I look at my phone, and it's 1 in the morning, so I decide to try going to sleep for real and manage to. I guess some time passes, and I end up jolting awake from my sleep with an overwhelming sense of dread. I notice that the door to the bathroom is still closed, and I call out to my mom but get no answer. I go to the bathroom and open the door, but the room is empty. Getting even more creeped out, I search the entire house, calling out for her, until I realized I was all alone. At this point I start crying because I'm just too freaked out, so I call my sister and ask where she is. Thankfully she had just pulled up and was talking to her friend in the driveway. When she came inside, I told her what happened, and she was weirded out. I look at my phone, it's a little after 2:30 in the morning, so I force myself to calm down and go back to sleep. The next morning I called my mom and asked if she came over the night before. She sounds confused because she was at her house the entire night. This was the weirdest and creepiest thing that has ever happened to me. I know I wasn't dreaming and was actually awake when I was talking to this thing, posing as my mom, but who the heck was I talking to? Let me know what you all think. Experiencing something strange and creepy during night rides. Hey everyone, I'm looking for some insight or advice on something strange that's been happening to me over the last few nights. I've recently been going on late night bike rides. I find it calming, but something creepy has started to happen. For the past 3 nights, I've been hearing clicking noises while riding. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then I realized the noise sounds exactly like the clicking noise I make with my tongue when I'm trying to get my dog's attention during our nightly walks. On the 3rd night, it got even weirder. The clicking noises got closer, and when I turned around, I saw a figure at the end of the street. The unsettling part is that they were riding the same model of bike as me. For context, my bike looks retro and was given to me by my grandmother, so it's pretty unique, especially with the custom decorations I've added. What made my blood run cold was that the figure was mimicking my movements. Every time it copied me, it seemed to get slightly better at it, almost like it was learning my movements. I tried to get away by heading up a road from the street, but when I realized it was a dead end, I was terrified. I hid in a bush, but the figure followed me to the street. Right before it could reach me, the streetlight turned off, and I couldn't see its face. I turned off my bike light so it wouldn't see me and managed to escape, but I have no idea what it was or why it was mimicking me. I didn't go on my bike ride tonight, however, when I took my dog for a walk later that evening, I heard the same clicking noise again. The dog, who's partly blind and deaf, started acting weird when the noise happened, which really creeped me out. I do believe animals can sense things we can't, and the way the dog reacted made me feel like whatever this animal is doesn't have good intentions. It was almost like the dog knew we weren't alone even before the noises stopped. I've been smudging myself in the entrances to my room, which has helped me feel safer. However, on the second night that I forgot to smudge, I had an incredibly vivid nightmare, though it felt more like a vision. In it, I was in the woods running from something, and I feel deep down that it was the same thing that was mimicking me. I'm genuinely confused and concerned. I've thought about reaching out to an elder in my community for guidance. Context: I'm Indigenous, but I'm also wondering if anyone here has experienced something similar or has any ideas about what could be going on. Any advice or insight would be appreciated. If anyone has any ideas or questions, please share them with me. My grandma died and was cremated. Now she throws water bottles and knocks on the door. My mother's mother was very abusive to my mom and uncle when they were growing up. When my mom moved out and later sided with my grandpa during the divorce, the negative attention extended to me. I was 1 at the time, and she threatened to cut my head off and mail it to my grandpa. Since then, my mother has neither seen nor talked to my grandma, and I've never seen her, period. My grandma died last week in a nursing home after years of illness. She was cremated, and her ashes were mailed to my mom last week. Grandma has been in the shed since then. My mom went to visit some old friends 3 hours north of us, so my husband and I have been house sitting since Friday. However, Thursday night is when we started noticing activity. We woke to the sound of a water bottle thrown across the room. My husband left for work before me, and when I got up, I noticed that the water bottle was in the middle of the floor again. After we began house sitting Saturday, we noticed a sharp escalation. We hear very loud, hard knocks or single thumps on the front door many times. We also heard scratching on various surfaces in the RV we're sleeping in for now, such as inside the shower or on the cabinets next to us. I slept very fitfully last night as a result. However, the creepiest of all was the sighting of her face. I was at work, and both my husband and a neighbor girl, a small child who likes to come next door when she's bored, it's a country thing, I guess, saw the face of an old woman staring inside. Also, every time something weird happens, the dogs bark and growl at the door. We have another night here, and then we'll be back home tomorrow. I'll tell my mom to put grandma somewhere so she hopefully isn't bothered either. I'll update if anything happens, but I really hope there's no need. My daughter freaked last night, pointing to the corner and screaming that she was scared. This is the creepiest thing that has happened to me. We were eating dinner last night at the dinner table. We were all sitting in our normal positions and having dinner like any other night. My 4-year-old is the biggest chatterbox at dinner time, and we have to keep prompting her to eat her food. So last night she says, "I'm done," and I tell her, "Just take a couple more bites." She immediately starts screaming. So loud and frantic, and my husband and I, along with our 2-year-old, are like, "What? What's wrong? Why are you crying?" And I mean tears streaming down her face, howling, and I thought maybe she bit her tongue or lip, but she says, "No. I'm scared." And she points to the corner of the dining room and keeps saying, "I'm scared, that's scary." Of course, there's nothing there. Our house was built in the 70s, and it has this little sink in the corner of the room that was meant to be used as a bar area or something. I'm not sure, but we don't use the sink. There are a couple shelves above it that we have a couple knickknacks on, and the whole area is mirrored. Think 1970s mirrors with gold veining. Anyways, I get out of my seat to walk around the table to comfort her, and she immediately jumps out of her chair and leaps into my arms, and she's saying, "Can we go downstairs? Please." My dining room, kitchen, and main floor are upstairs, the bedrooms are downstairs. Now, we do have a doll on the top shelf above the sink, and I'm trying to investigate what she is scared of. I asked if she was scared of the doll. She says yes. It is confusing to me because she always sits in that seat. The doll has always been there, but for some reason it freaked her out, or at least that's what she communicated to me in that moment. So I tell her, don't worry, I will put that doll away so it doesn't scare you anymore. We go downstairs, and she's fine. Takes a bath, goes to bed, no problems. This morning, we are in the dining room, and they are opening their advent calendar, and I point to the doll and again ask, is this what scared you last night? And she says, no, that's not scary. So I'm like, WTF. I ask her, why were you scared last night? And she just says, because it was dark. I literally could not sleep last night because of this. I shared a story about a week ago about how she talks to her angel mommy, so clearly she has some kind of insight into something else, but this was so scary, which scares me. I'm going to move the doll tonight. The creepiest house. So, this happened about 6 years ago in Portland, Oregon, and has always stuck with me. My boyfriend, now husband, and I were invited to our friend's birthday party at their new rental house. The moment I walked in there, I felt something was incredibly wrong. It was like a dark spirit was hanging on me. I just pushed it away and kept on hanging out. The roommate of my friend was a snake breeder and asked if we wanted to go see them in the basement. I said, hell yes. We walk down there, and I'm enveloped by a sense of dread. He then proceeds to tell me the last lady living here went crazy and covered the basement walls with scripture written in her blood. That's when I decided to head back upstairs. We decided to play a game of King's Cup. It was going fine, but I started mentioning to people I felt like something was behind me and following me. That's when all of a sudden the chandelier creaks and one of the crystals pops off and lands in the King's Cup. The issue with this is all the crystals have a hook around them to prevent this. Not 10 minutes later, we noped the duck out of there. My friend lived in one of the oldest houses in town, an old bootlegger's mansion built in the 20s. She had lived in the house for many years, and I was always over there and never had an issue. But one night I went to the bathroom like many times before, and everything was fine. About 30 minutes later, I had drunk a large iced tea. I went to the bathroom again, but this time I just had this dreaded feeling to go near the bathroom, something I had never experienced before and did not experience 30 minutes earlier. It was so strong I turned around and grabbed my phone to turn on the flashlight. That part of the house was dark, and her baby was asleep close by, so I did not want to turn on any bright room lights. Anyway, I felt super uncomfortable, quickly peed, and then went to leave when something grabbed my shoulder hard, and I could not physically leave. There was a mirror right in front of me, and I saw nothing there but the physics of my legs. And the lower portion of my body moving in the direction I wanted to go, but my shoulder and upper part of my body being stuck in place looked weird as hell. I was trying to shake free, and it took about 5 seconds to do so. I bolted out of there as quickly as possible and ran back to the room where my friends were, apparently white as a ghost. I did not want to bring it up because I did not want to freak out my friend who lived there alone with her young child, but she looked over at me and said, "That's why I never go into that bathroom." I had never thought about it before, but my friend literally never went into that bathroom. Whenever I would use it, she would ask if it needed toilet paper or cleaning, and if it did, I would do it for her. She is superstitious, so I sort of chalked it up to that before I had this experience. A couple of days later, when I was leaving her place after hanging out, my friend walked me out with her baby. She started screaming, thinking she had walked into a big spider web, apparently a common feeling with ghost stuff, and when my shoulder was grabbed, it too had a weird spider web-like sensation on my arm and neck, so I ran over to check her, and there were definitely no spider webs. We then both saw a swishy, dark, shadowy-like thing, sort of looked like the way a panther or large cat runs and jump from the ground near her car onto the hood, then onto the roof of her car, and then into the trees above. It felt dark and evil, and I have had a decent amount of ghost experiences, having grown up in a haunted house as a child, so these types of things usually don't freak me out or feel creepy/evil to me. These two experiences felt very different. It definitely had me worried and alarmed for a few weeks after. I was just wondering what type of thing that could be and what it meant for existence, I suppose. It shook my world up a bit. Creepiest field I've ever seen. A few days ago, I and my friends stumbled across a large field that was being used as a garbage dump. We explored a bit and found some unsettling stuff like cassette tapes and multiple old-fashioned dolls. We also stumbled across piles of bones and dozens of used needles. Now at the time we thought that it was weird but didn't take it to mind much. After this it was getting dark, so we all parted ways. Except for me and one of my other friends, who for some reason decided it would be okay to go back very late at night, so we start walking there, and just before we arrive, we notice that it is extremely foggy and that the moon is red/orange. The blood moon was yesterday, and we joke about how it seems like we are in a horror movie because all we brought was a half-working flashlight and one of our phones. When we reach the entrance of the field, it's a pitch-black alleyway that leads into the field, and the only way back is through there. We look inside of the small alleyway, and even when we shine the flashlight down the alley, we can't even see 3 meters in front of us. Now at this point, my friend and I are doubting heavily if it's a good idea to head in, and while we are talking, we suddenly hear extremely loud screams/screeches that sound like someone getting killed, and without even looking at each other, we start sprinting to the closest form of human life. A shop that was still open. We run inside and tell the shopkeeper what happened, but he doesn't seem too bothered. We head home quickly, and we note that the moon is no longer orange/red, and we both start freaking out fully as we can't figure out how the moon seemed to just change color like that. He's hyperventilating, and I can't stop shaking. Should I go back there with a larger group of friends who are better prepper? Creepy and simply unsolved. I had a roommate in college that I met a week prior to moving in through a posting on one of the school boards. We met each other's families, and they helped move us in. We rented one side of a twin house with some stairs, so help was needed for the bedroom furniture. We had our own bedrooms, and we were the odd couple. She had a messy room with clothes, books, etc., everywhere, and I was simple. About a month later, she began to complain about difficulty sleeping. Something was preventing her from resting, and she had several unusual bruises and scrapes on her back. We didn't know where they came from. She didn't have a boyfriend or anything. We were both nerds and studied or watched movies, no sports. Then one night, I came home from the library around 11 p.m. My roommate was home watching a movie. I said goodnight and went to bed. I woke up at 7 a.m. for class. Walked by her room, and her door was open. As I walked by, I looked into her room as I walked by. Her entire room was empty. She was no longer there. No note. I called the cops, and they didn't believe me that I had a roommate and left, even after showing the cops her parents' checks sent for rent. I called her cell. It was disconnected. Called her parents, disconnected. Asked around campus, no record of her. To this day, I have no idea how she moved all her stuff out between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. without me hearing anything or waking up. I'm a light sleeper, and as of 11 p.m., no one was in the house to help her. To this day I can't explain it, hence, it's the creepiest thing that has ever happened in my life. I moved out a week later. So creepy that I wish I was lying. We moved to California in 2019 because of military orders. We were living in base housing when this all took place. My husband was due to be gone for a short op in a few days. We were lying in bed with the blinds open so it wasn't completely dark. We heard our door squeak a little, then the sound of little feet against the floor, and then a small shadow. We thought one of our kids had woken up, so we turned the lamp on beside the bed, and nothing. Nobody was there. We went to the kids' rooms, and they were asleep. We were a little freaked but ignored it. A few days later, he left for the operation, and that's when things took a drastic turn. Our first night alone, the kids and I were watching TV when all of a sudden the box of small chip bags flew off the fridge. I told them we probably left it too close to the edge, trying to convince myself. That night, I tucked them in and went to my room to watch Netflix. I got up to get something to drink and I always check on them to make sure they're covered up. I sneak a peek in my daughter's room and she's asleep, but her blanket was being moved in an upward motion. Like a hand was moving it. I flung her door open, and the blanket dropped. I thought I was going crazy. A few days passed with nothing. But then it started happening again. I was in my room at night, and I started hearing crying, like deep, sad crying. I rush into the hallway. Both kids were asleep. I didn't tell anyone because I'm sure I would have sounded certifiable. The next day my kids were playing in my daughter's room. They came running out screaming, saying there's a girl in her closet, and she screamed at her to take her pigtails out or she'd cut them off and called her a little shit. My kids never cuss. That same night, I let the kids sleep on the couch with me BC they were so freaked. I FaceTimed my cousin, and she heard crying in the background. She asked if they were my kids. I said no and showed her they were asleep. I can't make this shit up. The next day we go to the store, come back home, and there are muddy child footprints leading to my bathroom and onto the shut toilet seat. They weren't from my kids. Later my son tells me Scary is what they called her and said she wants her Uncle Sean, that's why she's there. When I tell you I freaked out, man. I called my husband, and people in his unit said they had similar stuff happen in base housing. It's all haunted. He sent the chaplain to our house to bless it. He walked in and said the spirit is strong, and what he just did was going to make it mad. They wanted us to go stay in a hotel. My husband came home, and we instantly searched for a new place. On the day we were moving out, we had all our stuff scattered, putting it in boxes. We look over, and a candle is lit. Neither one of us lit that thing. I'm glad we got out. It was the creepiest situation I've ever experienced. Sorry for the long one, but a lot happened that made me question my sanity. My creepiest ghost experience. I lived in Union, Maine, for the first 14 years of my life. I lived in a beautiful blue farmhouse that had a huge basement, backyard, and blueberry field. I had been hearing some strange sounds coming from my basement, and my mom never wanted me to go down there. I let my mind get the best of me, and I decided to go down one day. My mom wasn't home, and I was there with my dog, so little me took my dog down with me so I wasn't scared. I walked down the 13 stairs to the basement, and my feet hit the floor, my dog right on my tail. When you walk down the stairs, you can go left or right. If you turn left, there's a little room that was used as a bedroom for my older brother. If you turned right, that was the garage area where we would bring cars in to work on them, along with a wood stove in the boiler room. Stacked along the wall was nothing but wood we used for heat. I remember walking around the area barefoot, and I stepped on a nail. I screamed in pain and wobbled my way up the stairs and tried to pull it out when my mom came home and found me in a pool of blood. We bandaged up my foot, and I was sent outside to play while my mom spent the afternoon sweeping up the basement. A few days later I wanted to go down again. So I did, once again bringing my dog with me. This time, I made sure to wear shoes. I made it over to the boiler room when I heard a small moan. That's when my dog started to freak out. He was growling, the hair standing up on the back of his neck. He was as nervous as I was. I panicked and once again ran back upstairs. I spent days wanting to figure out what was down there but gave up for a while. One night, I was lying in bed. You know when you're almost asleep and you get jumped awake? Well, I jumped, and when I did, I kicked my dog in the process and fell onto the ground, unable to move. The only thing I could move was my eyes, and they darted across the room at a corner I was always scared of. There, standing in that corner, was a tall black shadow. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I started to sweat as it walked over to me. And stopped right at my bedside. I looked at the clock, and it said 2:07 a.m. That moment is when my body awoke. I looked at my clock, and it said 7:02 a.m. I was asleep the whole time. I told my mom about it, but of course no one believed me. I wanted so badly to know what this thing was. A few weeks later, I had just come home from school, and my mom wasn't home. So I didn't do my homework because, as kids do, I wanted to play. My neighbor was home, so I decided to have him come outside to play with me in my basement. This is when things took a dark turn. He brought an Ouija board. We played around at the table downstairs when a pen spun around and hit me in the gut. He laughed and thought I did it on purpose when we both let go of the board. That's when the light started to flicker, and the board flipped up on its side. He threw it into the wood stove, but it wouldn't catch fire. That's when we knew we needed to get out of there. We started to run up the stairs when I was pushed down them. He didn't stop until he was at the top, when he finally noticed. Things finally started to calm down and went back to normal. My dreams kept repeating themselves, and I eventually sought out therapy. There are plenty more stories I want to share, so I will continue sharing them. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and bless you all. Look, I told a couple of people. But I don't talk about it to a lot of people because it makes me sound batshit insane. However, around 2 a.m. at night, my fire alarm goes off. I didn't realize it had been replaced with a voice one, so a soft woman's voice just goes fire. Creepy enough, but whatever. I look, and, nothing? I can't find a fire. Nothing is on. No smell. Nothing. Not even steam from the shower. Go to bed. 10 minutes later, fire. I get up again. No ducking fire. Nothing. Just my fire alarm's lights flashing. No smoke. No steam. Nothing's on. Then and this is where I lost my mind. Swear to duck, I hear, didn't you hear me? I said, fire. The. Ducking. Duck. Look around and swear there's a see-through old lady in the corner of my room. There's a fire. The non-existent figment of my imagination yells at me. Oh. Hell. No. I'm dreaming. Yeah, that's it. I go back to bed. Hiding under my covers. Duck this. There's a fire. I hear again. Finally I'm just like, whatever, I'm going insane, it's fine, and I get up, look that ghost in the non-existent eyes, and say, and what am I supposed to do about it? Call 000 and tell them a ghost told me there's a fire? And that's when I hear, fire trucks. Dozens of them are going down the block over. Oh good, they're here. My imagination figment ghost yells before going through my ducking wall and following the sirens. Yep, that's it. I'm done. I'm out. I take 2 anxiety medications and go straight to sleep. I am not having this. Nope. I heard and saw all of this. I'm ducking hallucinating. Nope. This is all in my goddamn head. I am not addressing this at what is now 2:30 a.m. The next morning I tell my partner of the weird shit I experienced the night before. I ask them if they heard the fire alarm, and they hadn't. For fun, and duck my partner for this, they look up if there was a fire last night. There was a fire. 3 blocks away. An old woman died while on the phone trying to call the fire department. There was a photo. It was the damn old lady I'd seen, wrinkle for wrinkle. It was my ducking ghost. My creepy experience. To start off, I live in Arkansas. Don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful state, but the town I live in is not so amazing. Me and my sister always rode our bikes around our neighborhood. There are a lot of druggies and just flat out creeps that live on our street. But that didn't stop me and my sister from riding our bikes around. We never rode our bikes too far from our house, and we were always cautious while riding our bikes, and we always told our mom when we were going out to ride our bikes so she would know where we were. This day was like any other, at least that's what my sister and I thought. My sister and I were just riding our bikes around, and then we saw 2 women. One of them was ahead of us, and one of them was behind us. The one in front of us was dressed in all black, and the one behind us was dressed in bright colors. My sister and I didn't think anything of either of them, and we just kept riding. And then all of a sudden the woman dressed in black just disappeared. 1 second she was right in front of us, and the next she was just gone. I and my sister pedaled as fast as we could back to our house. Once we got back to our house, we told our older cousin about what we had witnessed. We got back on our bikes, and our cousin got on his dirt bike, and we rode back up the road to the place that the woman disappeared. Like I had expected, nothing was there. We told our mom about what we had seen, and needless to say, she didn't believe us. And to this day nobody believes me and my sister about what we had seen that day. And to this day, my sister and I still can't explain what we saw, and we still haven't figured out what we saw. Our house had just been foreclosed on, and it was just my mom, brother, and me. We relocated to a modest rental house, feeling deeply saddened by the forced departure from our childhood home. My parents getting divorced was devastating to my mom financially. When you walked into the front door, there wasn't much more than maybe a 20 ft squared landing with a door to the garage, a closet, and a staircase to either go up or down. Upstairs were the dining room, living room, kitchen, and laundry. Downstairs were 3 bedrooms with a small bathroom. 2 of the bedrooms were basically the same size, with one significantly smaller. All of the rooms were about halfway underground, and the windows were right at ground level. I had a lot of nightmares about people staring in my windows, but that's irrelevant to the story, just creepy. Although I'm the youngest, it was decided that I would get the biggest room because I spend the most time there. My mom got the next biggest room, and my older brother got the smallest one. I had to have been somewhere between 14 and 16 years old, so my brother was 18 to 20. One thing that we all noticed about his room is that there was a little rocket sticker on the wall next to the light switch. He had told me that he thought several times about taking it down, but for some reason had the feeling that he shouldn't. My brother had a lot of experiences that sound a lot like sleep paralysis. One thing to note about his room is that the door for the crawl space was inside his closet. He had several stories about lying in bed, and he would be looking at the top corner of the room right next to his closet. On several instances, he would see it fill with complete darkness. There was a streetlight right outside our house, so even with the blinds closed, his room was always somewhat illuminated. Any and every time he saw this black mass, he was unable to breathe, speak, or move. When this happened, he said he had a feeling of pure terror. The only way he could break out of this paralyzed state was to start twitching any body part until he could finally break out of it, or to try as hard as he could to start talking. We had talked about it every time it happened. One night I heard him. He went gradually from wheezing to yelling. "Hello? Hello?" I hopped out of bed to make sure he was okay because I knew exactly what was going on, and I offered to let him sleep with me, as I also had a larger bed. He was okay, a little shaken up, but glad I checked on him. Please keep in mind that this is my older brother. That's not all, though. One night, I was lying in bed trying to sleep. Out of nowhere, I hear a little boy call my name. Couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old. I heard it more than once, though. When he said my name, it was very faint, and before he finished my name, he said it again, but much louder. The second time overlapped the first time, if that makes sense. I texted my brother, who was upstairs on the computer, and told him what happened. Apparently he didn't get my message until the next morning, but when he did, he was freaking out a little bit. He kept telling me I was just ducking with him. No? Apparently later that night, when he went to bed, he heard the same thing, but his own name was called by a little boy. We always wondered if there was something that happened there to a little boy but had no way of finding out. About 5 months ago I was driving from the East Coast to the Midwest to visit a friend. It was the first night of the drive, and I had made it decently far, about 7 hours on the road, enough to get deep into the Appalachian Mountains. It's about 11 or 12 at night, and I'm actually talking to my friend on the phone, and I tell her I need to pull over for some gas. I, for the record, am male, over 6 feet tall, broad, and not particularly easy to scare. Anyways, I see an exit sign, and it lists one gas station off the ramp, so I pull off and follow the signs. When I get off the ramp, I have to make a right-hand turn, go a little ways, make another right, go around behind a stretch of buildings, and finally behind another building to finally get to this gas station. As you pull in, you come to the single gas pump first, and off to your right is a small, backwoods convenience store. In front of you, across the dirt parking lot, is a 3-story farmhouse, possibly belonging to the owner of the little station. I get out, look around, and think, man, this is some backwoods-ish. Even though I've been a spelunker since middle school and have seen some really rural mountain areas, there's something different here. The little convenience store is closed, but it's almost midnight, and that's not weird. I start to pump my gas, and it hits me. My friend on the phone is asking, "Hello? Are you there?" And I realize I've faded out of the conversation and am standing literally frozen in fear. A deep, penetrating fear, like I've never felt before. I can't stop staring at this goddamn farmhouse. I can't stop. I can't look away. There's this window up at the apex of the house on the 3rd floor, and I can't take my eyes off of it. It's pitch black behind that window, like all the other windows in the house, but I can't look away from it.
I stare another long moment before I'm finally able to stutter to my friend, I have to get out of here.
This is wrong. I have to go. I stop pumping gas after having pumped about $3, jump back in the car, and start it up as quietly as I can. I still can't stop looking at this ducking window. What is it? What is wrong with me? I feel as if I am in a zombie-like state or a trance. I'm inching the car out of the lot. And the light behind the window comes on. There are no curtains, and the silhouette of a person can be seen quite clearly in the light. I floor it, drive until I see an exit with multiple gas stations, and pull off for gas finally, still terrified, but at least that overwhelming sense of dread is gone. The funny thing is, on the way home, I took the same route and never saw a sign for that gas station again. This was by far my creepiest experience. I want to begin by stating that throughout my life, I have encountered various experiences, from fleeting glimpses in the corner of my eye to full-on shadow people. However, none compare to this particular experience. I swear it's 100% true. It all starts with my mom joining a local ghost hunting group in South Jersey. She formed a friendship with a woman and her husband, who joined the group due to a haunting in their house. In all honesty, this family was quite unsettling. The wife had eyes like a dead fish that she passed on to her 2 really strange kids, who had zero boundaries. Her 17-year-old son was especially weird and made me wildly uncomfortable the second I met him. So my mom goes to their house and backs their claims up, saying there's definitely something there. Curious about the situation, my 3 girlfriends and I decide to visit their house one night to see what happens. Shit starts happening the literal second we get there. The minute I got out of the car, I could feel something looking at us from the basement window, but I thought maybe I was just amped from anticipation. When we walked into the house, the creepy son was staring at my girlfriend and me through this door with a yellow window leading to the kitchen. The ducking kid didn't say a damn word, just stared at us so uncomfortably that one of the girls was close to refusing to go in, and my mom had to call him out and kick him out of his own house. Once he goes, we decide to sit around the living room and chat for a bit before taking a tour of the house. Within 10 minutes there are some knocks on walls, but since Creeper left, I'm not convinced it isn't him. But then, little trinkets on her entertainment center shake a little bit. Kind of strange, but it wasn't enough to really freak me out. So that's when we decide to start the tour, leading with the basement. Almost immediately, you can feel a change in the room's energy when you begin to walk down the stairs. The best way I could describe it is thick and stale air. We're down there for a minute when my friend just starts to cry uncontrollably, and she can't explain why. She was so overcome with sadness she had to go upstairs. It was at this point that my creepiest moment happened. It sounds crazy, but as people are talking, I can feel something tightening around my neck. It pulled so tightly that I let out an audible choking sound, and in that moment I knew that someone had ended self by hanging. I can't explain how or why, but I just knew it. I could feel it, and my mom's friend confirmed it was true. Now, I've just known things before, but I had never had a physical reaction to go along with it. But this was just the start of all kinds of shit for the night. We decided to go upstairs to the second floor, and another friend felt a pinch on her foot. Then, in a back room, we tried to recite the Lord's Prayer, but somehow everyone forgot. I'll be honest here, I'm kind of a heathen and couldn't recite it if my life depended on it. But my girlfriends were raised Catholic and spent their time in CCD and could recite it backwards. Kind of strange. Then, as we turn to leave, we hear a series of footsteps rush up right behind me. I'll admit I totally screamed out loud for this one and decided I'd rather go back downstairs. On the way down the steps, I felt what I would describe as a cobweb or a long hair gently graze my forehead. I figured it was one of my own long hairs just going rogue when the three people behind me felt the same. There were no cobwebs, and we all felt the same soft touch. The stairs led to the kitchen, so we stopped to hear my mom's friend's stories, when another friend and I saw a full shadow run down the stairs and pass us in the kitchen, and it ran right through my right shoulder. I felt that thing again, and that was about the moment when I had reached my limit. My shoulder just felt tingly and uncomfortable. I can't think of another way to accurately describe that feeling. Almost like my body was bothered on a cellular level. Ducking creepy. We had all had enough by that point and decided it was time to head out. It was a pretty quiet drive home. That week, I woke up in the middle of the night feeling watched. One of my girlfriends had awful nightmares for a few nights after. Then, my mom experienced some serious heart issues. I'm not convinced they're related, but my mom firmly believes it. Either way, I've had things happen before and since then, they have never compared. Furthermore, my interest in exploring haunted houses has subsided just a bit. I've told this story to a few people, and most don't believe me. If I didn't have my girlfriends and mom to back me up, I'd definitely question what happened that night. Something screamed for me. About 10 years ago, when I was a teen, I was on the computer messing with the files for my MP3 player. I remember the moment being simple and uneventful. I was home alone, it was late in the afternoon, and I didn't have a care in the world. Then something unexpected happened. I hear a voice screaming my name. It didn't sound human whatsoever. It sounded like there was static or something in the voice, and it was extremely loud and desperate sounding. ASH lay. Kind of yell. It almost seemed like the voice was ripping through space to yell at me. It is very difficult to explain in words how abnormal it sounded. It was much louder than anything in the background, and it wasn't coming from my computer. The yell sounded like it came from behind me and everywhere at the same time. It was truly terrifying. Nope. I jolted outside of my house with the cordless phone and called my mom. I refused to go in the house until my mom got home. My mom seemed disturbed with what I had said but dismissed it. She said maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. I knew it was too blunt of an experience to be that. Later that week I visited my dad, and I told him about my experience. He was surprised and told me the same thing happened to my mom when they were married, and he witnessed it. He told me they were both resting in bed trying to wake up in the morning, and suddenly a booming voice screamed my mom's name. They both were scared as hell and ran out of the room. He said it never happened again after that. I went back to my mom, and she denied it, while my father swore it happened. It wasn't until a few years ago, when I asked again, she admitted it. She told me she didn't want to scare me more by telling me that it happened to her too. She told me it was one of the creepiest things that had ever happened to her and described it just like how my dad had. This happened in 2 different locations. For my mom, it was at her first apartment, and then for me, it was in the house I grew up in. It has bothered me for a long time. I have no idea what that voice was and why it called out to me. I read once somewhere when spirits try to actually communicate with sound, it comes out distorted and loud. I find this weird since I had many encounters with spirits but never like this. It didn't seem like anything happened because of the event. No increase of spiritual activity or the hint of some foreshadowed disaster as well. It seems like a big experience that kind of fell flat since my mother and I have no idea why something was trying to communicate with us. I wonder why the same thing would happen to my mom even before I was born. My little brother said he never had an experience like it, so I guess it isn't directly connected to family. Yet both my mother and I are sensitive to spirits in our ways. I would love any ideas on why/how this happened and what it was. Stories of similar experiences would be appreciated as well. Oh. I want to clarify that neither my mom nor I have any serious mental health issues that would cause us to hear voices. This was a one-time thing, so far, for both of them. About a month ago I went over to my girlfriend's house. Except I felt really uneasy when I went into the living room. Turns out, they replaced a china cabinet with one of her grandmothers, who passed away a few months back. Her grandmother was bedridden in the hospital, and I've never gotten to meet her. I felt uneasy the whole time. Being around her grandmother's furniture made me so anxious and almost sad. When I told her, she said it was probably nothing. She went to the bathroom. When I went over to the cabinet, it was about 6 feet tall. Dark wood. The structure had 2 doors on the side and glass panels in the front. And in the back was a mirror. I was looking at the teacups and small baby dolls when I could swear I saw someone in the mirror behind me. Just a silhouette. I called out to my girlfriend. But as I did, I heard a shrill screech from the bathroom. I start pounding on the door. And it opens. She was sitting on the floor. Crying. She said she saw someone in the bathroom mirror. We booked it out of her house. No shoes. No jacket. I had nothing on and headed straight for my car. I dove for an hour or so. With no destination. When I returned her to her house, her mom was sitting on the doorstep. She said she kept seeing shadows move. Nope. Creepiest home alone experience. When I was around the ages of 12 to 13, I would often be left home alone after school. My parents and my younger sisters normally didn't arrive home for about an hour and a half. I normally didn't mind being alone at all. I could eat whatever I wanted, watch TV at a loud volume without being yelled at, and yell about how shitty my day was to my friends on FaceTime without being interrupted. On that particular day I walked in the door and dropped my bags. All I wanted to do was eat a fresh bowl of mac and cheese and cry. I was exhausted. So I got to doing just that. As soon as I began to boil the water, I heard the unmistakable sound of somebody wearing big, heavy snow boots walking around downstairs. I knew it couldn't have been anybody in my family because my father, who was always the first one home besides me, wouldn't be home for another hour. Even if he had gotten home early, he would have messaged me, and I would have clearly heard the garage door open. To stop myself from panicking, I told myself that the washing machine was most likely uneven and I should go and check on it. I turned the stove off, and just in case somebody was breaking in, I grabbed a giant kitchen knife and went downstairs. The washing machine or the dryer wasn't even running. My brain basically froze. I stood in front of the stairway for a good minute trying to figure out what I had heard, trying to put some kind of calming explanation behind it. When all of a sudden the room went freezing cold, I felt somebody standing behind me. When whoever this was breathed down my neck, it was over. I full-on sprinted up the stairs, not only hearing footsteps behind me but also hearing heavy breathing. When I got to the top of the stairs, I remembered I was holding a knife. I spun around to teach this mother ducker not to go into people's houses, and when I did, nobody was there. I assumed that the intruder had retreated downstairs, so I locked myself in the bathroom and messaged my dad. He told me to stay put and to not make any loud sounds. When I asked him if I should call 911, he said no. There I sat, in the bathroom, trying not to cry, because my worst nightmare had finally come true. When all of a sudden I heard the sound of the heavy boots again. But this time they were walking up the stairs. I quickly messaged my dad to see if he was home, and he said no. I felt my stomach drop as the footsteps came closer and closer until they were right at the door. I covered my mouth with my hand, but that still didn't cover the sound of my heavy breathing, due to sheer panic. I could see the shadow of this person's feet in the crack underneath the door. I could hear him breathing on the door. I stood there, silencing my cries, tears rushing down my face. I was horrified. All of a sudden I heard my dad's garage door open. A rush of relief filled my body. I heard the intruder run into my parents' room. My dad checked the entire house. There was nothing, no broken windows, all the doors were locked, and of course there was no intruder. The only thing that was wrong. What's the basement? It was trashed. When my mother had cleaned it that day. My dad joked about how it was just my imagination. He said that I was just paranoid. To this day, I still can't explain it. I know what I heard. I know what I felt. The creepiest house I've ever been to. My dad is a general contractor that has worked with a few realty companies to make sure houses are ready to be sold. We usually go to the house we're working on and check to see what all we need to do and what materials we need. With that, here's the story. We were surprised to see that the house was actually not too far from our house, maybe 3 minutes away. Usually we have to drive for quite a while. I immediately did not get a good feeling about the house. It has a very long driveway with half-dead trees lining it. As we pulled up to the house, I felt like I was being watched. This house is old, like probably built in the 20s, maybe. As usual, I went to get the keys out of the lockbox on the door. I get the key out and unlock the door, but I stop and wait for my dad because I'm still feeling weird. When he gets to the door, I try to open it, but I can't. Now I'm not a small guy 6 feet tall and weigh just under 200 pounds, so I put my shoulder into the door, and it still doesn't open. As we walk back to our truck, the door swings open. I know how it sounds, but I'm not making it up. It was just like in a cheesy old movie. So after that I'm feeling a little more creeped out, but we have a job to do, so we go on in. As we walk in, what hits me first is the weird layout. We walk into a small entry hall. To our right is a hallway, on the left there is a small dining room, and straight ahead is the living room and the stairs to the second story. The reason I say it's weird is the stairs are completely enclosed. Usually there's like a balcony over an entry, but not this one. We start making our way through the house and start by going into the dining room. What I saw made me a little sick. As we walk in, I notice a stain on the wall and floor. When I get closer, I see it's a puddle of blood. It's not very large, but still, it's a puddle of blood in a creepy old house. I don't know if anyone else understands this, but I could feel the death in the room, like I felt heavy. After we saw this, we started moving a little more quickly. We kind of just glanced at the rest of that side of the house. When we got over to the right side, we found that the hallway led to a small circular room that had some rickety stairs leading into it. The only other strange thing downstairs was the fact that there was no door to the backyard, just windows. Also, I don't remember there being a bathroom downstairs. The upstairs was honestly weirder. There was one long hallway at the top of the stairs that ran across the house from the left to the right. To the left there was the master bed and bath, straight ahead there was a bathroom, and to the right there were 2 rooms, one on each side of the hall. Then the hallway dead-ended into a window that looked out onto the roof of the circular room. These 2 rooms to the right were bizarre. They were giant, but they didn't have closets or light fixtures. After all that, we went to the truck so my dad could see how much everything would cost. Just before we got out to check the backyard, I saw my dad freeze. He looked almost scared. I looked up to see the curtains in one of the upstairs rooms move. My dad gets his gun from the truck, and we go back in thinking it's a hobo or a junkie. We get upstairs, and he checks the master while I stand on the stairs. I don't hear or see anyone, and there is no one in the master bathroom or either bathroom. My dad says he thought he saw someone, but he guessed it was nothing. As we go back down, I notice that some of the downstairs windows are now open. We both agree that there is no way anyone got past us, so we just say we didn't notice at first. This part is what made me not go back to the house. We follow a path into the backyard that leads to, honestly, I don't know what it was. The backyard was empty except for a small fenced-in area maybe 4 feet square. When we got over to it, I got chills. It was some kind of shrine. A bench was set in front of a large block of stone. An old figure, which had been exposed to the elements for so long that it had lost its features, sat on top of the block. This was the place that I felt paranoid because I felt like someone was breathing on my neck, and I just wanted to leave after that. We locked up the house and got out of there. The next part really proved that I wasn't being crazy. My dad took my uncle to the house because I refused to go back. My dad didn't say anything to him because he wanted to see how he reacted. My uncle immediately felt like he was being watched and got spooked. He told my dad later, after they left, he thought he had seen someone in the same window we had. So there it is, my weirdest day at work. Once again, I'm sorry for how long this story was, I just felt that I needed to tell every detail. Saw a creepy looking blue face in my mom's mirror. This happened when I was 12 or so. My mom had just bought this new house. The house was only like 5 years old. We moved in, but I didn't have a bedroom yet. She was having someone finish our basement so my bedroom could be put down there. When the basement was being finished, I was sleeping on my twin-size mattress in her room until my room was ready. My mom had a vanity mirror in her bedroom. So if I sat up on my mattress, the mirror would be slightly to my left. I slept in her room for about a month and never felt scared or anything. But I remember one night having a dream and waking up really fast and opening my eyes and looking straight into the mirror. I saw this bright blue face staring at me and smiling with this really creepy smile, and the face looked kind of like a robot. I don't know how to even describe it. It literally makes my eyes water thinking about it. I was so scared. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. I ended up putting the covers over my head and never looked back at the mirror that night. I never saw it again. I have no idea what it was. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the face had this bright blue light coming from it. The house was brand new. The only thing weird was there was an old abandoned farmhouse in some woods in my backyard, but what I saw didn't look like an entity. After this I refused to ever have a mirror in my room ever again. Even to this day, I won't look at a mirror in the dark, and my boyfriend thinks it's crazy. Mirrors just scare me in the dark. Has anyone else seen anything like that? The late night creeps. So me and my best friend at the time were having a sleepover at her house one night. We were about 14 at the time, and we had frequent sleepovers. We were pretty bored, and we thought it was a good idea to walk to Dollar General to get some snacks for the night. It was about 9 p.m. There was a shortcut behind her house through a church parking lot and through a little pathway to the Dollar General. So we make our way to Dollar General, and we get all the snacks that we want. We take the same way we came back. Mind you, it's super dark outside, so as soon as we go through the pathway, my friend turns her phone flashlight on. It's a very short pathway, not too long until we are back at the church parking lot, so we are walking, and we go to take a right, and boom, we run straight into an older Hispanic man with a 1,000-yard stare on his face. My friend screams, but she quickly apologizes. The man still does nothing, he doesn't move. He doesn't change his facial expression, and he doesn't speak. He just keeps standing there in the darkness with nothing, so we keep walking through the church parking lot, and my friend kind of blows it off, but I keep my eyes on the area where we saw him, and I'm walking backwards and she's walking forwards. We are talking and walking, and I still cannot brush it off, and then, as we are walking about halfway through the parking lot, I see about 6 men come out of the darkness, and they're bolting at us at full speed. Luckily, we are a good bit ahead, and I scream at her and tell her we need to run, they are coming, so we start booking it, and I don't know why we didn't just run the rest of the way to her house, but we decided to hide behind an air conditioning unit behind the church. Not long after, we hear them run past, and they're all yelling in Spanish, so we couldn't understand what they were saying. Shortly after they pass, we build up the courage to run the rest of the way back to her house, and as we make it to her house, there's a fence right behind her house, and we see them running behind the fence. They never saw us or where we went, but it still scares me to this day to think about when we ran into that man. Were they just hiding in the shadows behind the bushes, waiting for us? What if they didn't give us a head start and just attacked us then? What if they found us and caught up to us before we got away? So many things could have happened. To this day it still gives me the chills to think about what their intentions truly were. 1988. When my daughter was around 2 years old, we moved to a, new to us, 4-bedroom house. Bedroom number 1 was for my wife and me, and number 2 was her room. Soon after moving in, we noticed that after putting her to bed for the night, we'd hear her talking and laughing long after she should have been asleep. Peeking in after about the 3rd night of this, we found her standing at the end of her crib, chattering away with the closet door about 5 feet away. Typical new parents, we'd tell her to lie down and go to sleep. This continued for many nights, and then we noticed she was actually holding conversations, talking a little, listening some, and answering yes, no, or I don't know. When we asked her about it, she said she was talking to the lady in the green dress. This continued sporadically but eventually died down to where if she was continuing the conversations, we weren't catching them. When we asked what she talked about, she either said stuff, or school, daycare, or I don't know. Time passed, and her little brother was born. After the initial baby in the parents' room phase, we moved them together into the room. When he could stand on his own, pulling himself up on things, the same thing happened. We'd hear him babbling and peek in to see him doing the same thing, standing at the end of the crib, talking to the closet, his sister fast asleep in her bed. Again, it continues sporadically, slows, and stops. 3 years go by. 2 boys now, so big sister gets her room, and the 2 boys share the room. Same behavior from the youngest. We have no way of knowing if they discuss this among themselves, but each described a lady in a green dress. In asking them separately, one might mention, she has long hair. Son might say, she has black hair. If asked if it's long or short, curly or straight, he'd say, it's long. And so on in many details. When we heard a new detail from one and gave a multiple choice for that detail to the other, they'd always agree, belt or no belt, color, shoes, white lady/black lady/Indian lady, whatever. At this point, though, we're thinking they could all be remembering the same picture from a storybook or something, so. Then weird stuff starts happening. Now, the wife and I were both smokers, and the rule was one could smoke outside or in the bathroom upstairs, which had a ceiling exhaust fan, but nowhere else in the house. One fine cold evening, too cold to go outside for just a smoke, I used this rule. I'd put the youngest to bed, the 2 older children were downstairs watching a movie. Suddenly I hear them yelling the youngest child's name and running through the house. This makes more sense if you know the downstairs came up into the kitchen, go right and you're in the dining room, go right and you're in the hallway, go right and you're in the living room, go right and you're back in the kitchen. The older two were running in this circle and yelling the youngest name in an exasperated way, so I stub out my smoke and exit the bathroom just as the older two were making the circuit again. What's going on, you guys? We're chasing, youngest. He's supposed to be in bed. I peek into the bedroom. Yes, he is in bed. No, he's not. He just went into the kitchen again. We heard him on the stairs and just saw him run up. He's not supposed to be awake watching movies now, so we tried to tell him, but he kept going around the corner, so we ran after him. So, basically, they glimpsed someone on the steps and chased the figure. Every time they turned a corner in this circuit, they caught just a glimpse of the figure turning the next corner and continued the chase. My youngest was truly asleep. Turned bedroom number 3 into a study. It was downstairs. One day I'm home in my study, my wife at work, and my kids at school. Someone is pacing the floor above me. A slow walk from one end of the living room directly above me, then back again. Since I know no one is home, I guess it's my sister-in-law, who has a key and a penchant for dropping by occasionally unannounced. I go upstairs, doors are all locked, nobody there. Could it be street traffic? But it was exactly the sound of someone walking above, that one squeaky floorboard and everything. I mentioned this to my wife. Oh, you heard the walking man. When I stayed home sick that day last month, I heard it all the time. Someone was walking back and forth in the living room, but nobody was ever there when I checked. Okay, so we've got that going for us, which is nice. I'm wondering how to enlist this character to push a vacuum cleaner while he's at it. No more green lady chats, no more phantom kids running around the house. I occasionally hear the walking man, but I've learned to ignore him. He doesn't answer questions or anything like that. We've left out pen and paper, nada, okay, we're cool, he's cool, whatever. 2000. We're moving, we just need a bigger house. The realtor assures us we don't have to mention the other residents to prospective buyers, so that's nice. Most of the stuff is packed up and moved into storage so the house shows well. Someone buys it, and we start packing the last of everything so we can move later in the week. With the shows well, it just looked roomy. Now it actually looks like a place someone is leaving. My oldest son, still in the number 2 room, the green lady room bedroom, where he shares bunk beds with his younger brother, gets up in the night to use the bathroom. In the living room, clearly visible down the hall, is a tall man standing and staring at the wall, his back to my son. My son said he knew instantly it wasn't me. This tall figure begins to turn slowly towards my son. My son changes his mind about using the bathroom and runs back into his own room, where there's a woman sitting on the floor. In her lap is a small child. They're both looking at my son, who at this point is screaming his head off and running into our room/bed/covers. So we check, and there's nobody else in the house, of course. For the next couple of nights, just because, we set up a video camera in the corner of the living room that would give the most coverage. We don't have motion sensors, and the tape runs 8 hours or so on the lowest quality, but in the 2 or 3 nights we taped after bedtime, nothing happened, at least nothing caught on tape. And we moved, and that's it. Except, we never really noticed until the move, but when you walk into a house and there's nobody home, you somehow feel that. I'm home, and I'm the first one home, and I'm the only one home. We realized that we had never felt that since 1988, only in the new house. My wife also said it felt lonely being the first one to come home to the new house. So at some level, maybe we all sensed something. I don't know. This is probably the creepiest thing I remember. The house I grew up in was notorious for being haunted, but I was pretty sheltered from the stories until I got older. Brief background, my eldest brother works a lot of temp jobs, and if they were in the city, he would pop by and camp out in the basement for a few nights. It wasn't unusual for him to show up really late when he did this, and he had a key so he wouldn't wake anyone up. Well, as a kid I was a really light sleeper, so even with my room on the 2nd floor, I could easily hear the door opening and would rush downstairs to greet him, as I didn't get to see him that much. Well, one night I awoke to loud, stomping footfalls ascending the basement stairs. I thought it was strange not hearing anybody coming home. I didn't think anything of how measured but odd the footfalls were. I just got up and walked towards the stairs to go down and say hi. I remember distinctly stopping at the top of the 2nd floor stairs because suddenly, the basement door erupted in noise, like someone panicking to get out, the doorknob being frantically lurched side to side, and pounding on the door. It was so loud, but it woke nobody else up, so being the dumb kid who would have survived 5 seconds in a horror movie, I calmly continued downstairs, opened the lively basement door, which wasn't locked or anything, only to find nothing. I remember being a bit scared at this point, because I was alone in the dark and I hated the basement, but all I did was go back to sleep, not thinking about it again until I got older. It was a warm summer night. The moon was full, or near enough that our flashlights didn't much matter. My friends and I had driven to Virginia City, Nevada, to explore the American Flats. The flats were part of local folklore, rumored to be the haunt of Satanists, according to my coworker. What they were for sure were the crumbling remains of a gold and silver mill built in the 1920s. Imagine a sprawling industrial complex more than 80 years. Collapsing cement structures, rebar protruding from the walls, ceilings caved in, and floors with gaping holes that would send you on a 50-foot drop. Everything was covered in rust, graffiti, and broken glass. We parked at a gate that blocked the road and walked a short distance into the ruins. The first building that caught my eye was smaller than the rest. Perhaps it had been an office? Gold and red pentagrams covered the external walls. We ventured inside. 3 rooms. The first contained a desk, a chair, and a bookshelf. On the bookshelf were probably 50 small jars filled with rocks and a clear liquid. On the desk was a stack of blueprints and a long-expired bottle of ranch dressing. In the second room were bunk beds made out of plywood and 2x4s. There were 3 bunks for a total of 6 beds in a tiny room. The third room was the smallest. Cement floors, cinder block walls, a metal drain in the center of the room, and deep, crimson stains splattered on the floor and walls. I don't know what the stains were, but in the middle of the night, with our dim flashlights, it was easy to imagine the worst. We were all a little unnerved. We decided to move on. The next building we explored was a little bigger. Someone had framed the entrance with scrap wood and installed a screen door. Inside were thousands of pieces of mail. Torn envelopes, birthday cards, credit offers, and bills, all of it addressed to different individuals. We presumed it was stolen. On a counter, peeking out from a pile of mail, was a stack of books. One was about obtaining your GED, and several more were on receiving government grants. Dust covered everything except 2 boxes in the corner. The boxes were worn but didn't appear as old as the yellowing, dirty mail. Upon closer inspection, we could see that they had contained guns. One a rifle, the other a handgun. There were some empty casings inside, but the guns themselves were missing. Behind us a gust of wind slammed the screen door, and we all jumped. We left that building and went outside. In the bright moonlight, things didn't feel as creepy. We climbed a hill alongside a tall building with corrugated metal walls. There was a large hole in the wall closest to us, and we could see a catwalk cross the opening. I picked up a small rock and chucked it through the hole. Just as it passed through, while we all watched, flashlights pointed inside, and something large and dark passed across the opening. The catwalk was metal, old, and rusted, but whatever we had seen made absolutely no noise. We all took off running. At the bottom of the hill, we turned back towards the car, which unfortunately meant passing the building again. A few minutes and we were all feeling silly. Why had we run? Because of some shadow? I was determined to redeem myself after running away. There was nothing to be afraid of. We returned to the building, this time from the front. It was very large, perhaps 3 stories. The side we now faced was broken open, and from the road we could see it was wide open inside. There were 4 of us and only 2 flashlights. I approached the building with 1 light while my less prideful companions crowded around the other near the road. Dust filled the air inside so I could see the beam of my flashlight. There was a creak on the catwalk above me. I raised my flashlight higher. Rust floated down through my light. Something was definitely moving. Before my light reached the catwalk, there was this inhuman, blood-curdling scream that just absolutely pierced your chest. Duck that. We all started running again and didn't stop until we were in the car. One guy actually cried. Don't know what it was, but it scared us all pretty good. It wasn't the last time we explored the flats, but nothing like that ever happened again. My mother asked me to move in with her and her new boyfriend. He was a lovely guy, had a huge house, compared to what I lived in, and seemed mild-mannered. This set off a bunch of warning bells for me because my mother is unpleasant. My bedroom had a hospital bed in it. It moved up and down, raised, and vibrated. I thought that it was cool and decided not to ask why it was there because my mom's boyfriend, Jack, was so nice. I did not want to stir the pot. There was an old black and white television set in the room at the foot of the bed. I started to have dreams about it. Early on I was in a suit purchasing the television, taking it home, and setting it up. After a month or so, things got weird. I heard voices outside of my bedroom window. I couldn't hear what a man and a woman were arguing about. At first I thought that it was the neighbors, but it could not have been them. They were both old women. This sounded like a young couple. Fast forward 6 months. I cannot sleep. The TV turns on and blares static in the middle of the night. I try unplugging it, but it does not help. My mother tells me not to move the set before I even ask. Jack wants it to be there. My dreams are so intense that I feel like the waking world is false and that the dream world is real. I grasp the concept of insanity for the first time in my life. My English teacher finds me crying in the hallway. She tells me to be strong and patient without asking what is wrong. I struggle to comply. The days blend together. I lose so much weight that my mother thinks I am anorexic. She watches me force feed myself at every meal. I feel as if I am shoveling tasteless matter into my mouth. But I do it anyways. I do not want her to feel bad. After about 2 more months, it gets unbearable. I wake up to what I can only describe as a seizure. My body is spasmodically flapping on the ground. My mind is racing, panicking, screaming. I wish that I could call for help, but my jaw is flapping without permission. I recover. The fear fades and is replaced with rage. I do not deserve this. I get excellent grades, work hard, and have never hurt anyone. It is this ducking TV. I gather myself and head to the basement. There is a tool bench. I want to grab a saw blade and drag it across my wrist. Instead, I find myself reaching for a ballpoint hammer. The first swing destroys the television screen. Bits of glass, wire, and circuitry fly around me. Yet, I am still swinging. I continue to swing. Glass cuts my wrist. Blood splatters on the wall. But I cannot help myself. I hate this. My mom comes in and stops me. She takes me to the ER. It takes 11 stitches, but they are able to take care of me. The car ride home is silent. My mom cried. I tried not to. I had one more dream. A woman walked into my room. She was wearing a stained hospital gown. I felt a chill. It seemed to pour out from her in a manner similar to how fog emerges from dry ice. She walked over, put her hands on my shoulders, and straddled me. Her knees dug into the sides of my ribs, shooting ice-cold daggers into my chest. I screamed, and she screamed back. It was an awful thing to hear. I imagine it to be like the screech of a wildcat in the midst of an Alaskan winter. I jolted awake, and for 5 seconds she was still there. She was still screaming. My mother sprinted into the room as the woman was fading. She screamed, and the woman disappeared completely. We never spoke of it. 6 months later, Jack's son arrived home on leave. I had a couple of drinks and told him the whole story. He told me that his mother died of MS in the bed that I slept in. I still get nightmares. Secluded old house in Connecticut. My uncle, a wallpapering expert, and my father, a skilled carpenter, teamed up for a project. An old white Victorian house nestled in the quiet seclusion of rural Connecticut. For my 13-year-old self and my 11-year-old cousin, this was more than just a renovation project. It was an open invitation to explore our fascination with the supernatural. This particular house felt like hitting the jackpot. The property sprawled across several acres, boasting a built-in greenhouse. Further out, a dilapidated shed leaned at the yard's edge, where the forest began. Even without any ghost stories, the entire scene possessed a certain eerie charm, which is a quality often found in the old homes of the East Coast, to be honest. Left to our own devices, we approached the back of the house at the kitchen entrance. A basement door loomed wide open by the entrance with an immediate unwelcome vibe. A certain sense settled over me, a feeling that something resided here, and it wasn't exactly good. Despite the thrill of quenching my curiosities, the urge to remain in the yard for the rest of the afternoon was almost overwhelming. But my cousin was too bold for this. As we ventured deeper into the house, a profound dread came over me, each step feeling heavier than the last. My body seemed to resist the house. My cousin, meanwhile, was claiming to hear things and became fixated on exploring the attic. Honestly, I was already beyond done with this place. Even my 13-year-old brain registered that this was not a good place. All I wanted was to do was go sit in the car. We made our way up to the attic, and to my relief, it had been renovated. Despite the lingering unease, it wasn't the least bit creepy, visually. There was even a small TV, which I turned on, sitting on the floor in front of it. But my cousin's attention was snagged by a closed door. She stood before it, completely still, her gaze fixed. Now, this was an 11-year-old who was usually a whirlwind of energy, constantly talking or making sounds. So her sudden silence spoke volumes. I tried to ignore it. But then she grabbed the knob and began yanking on it, but the door wouldn't budge. So logically, it was likely an unfinished storage area, so the wood was probably swollen shut from moisture. Looking back now, though, I think I was wrong. I stood up to help her. The door was genuinely jammed. But she became almost frantic. Her insistence on opening it was bordering on aggression. It was super disturbing to see her like this. I started pulling with all my strength, and the door finally gave way with a strong burst. I fell backward, still gripping the doorknob, as a sudden, powerful gust of wind swept over us, whipping our hair back. My cousin screamed, a sound of pure terror, frozen in place, her eyes wide. By the time I regained my balance and rushed to see what she was seeing, there was nothing. But I swear, her sheer terror was real. This particular room was the true attic, unfinished, with splintered wood, random old antiques scattered about, and a grimy old window. Upon looking in, an intense wave of nausea hit me. I slammed the door shut without a second thought. A primal fear surged through me, and I immediately scooped up my cousin and bolted down the stairs, out of that house and into the yard. Even now, she won't tell me what she saw. She just laughs it off and changes the subject. It leaves me constantly questioning, was that terror just a figment of my overactive imagination, or was it something tangible? The feeling was so intense, so visceral, it made me physically ill. I don't know the history of that house, but deep down, in my soul, I feel that something truly awful happened there. Well, here goes. One time I messed with a Ouija board. In fact, 2 times. My great-grandfather had just passed away, and I was becoming interested in theology at the ripe age of 12. This theology study led me to some occult things, and from there I read about spirit boards, or Ouija boards, which you could use to talk to dead people. I was looking for an excuse, and I really wanted to talk to my great-grandfather, so I went for it. I didn't have a professional one, but that wasn't a problem. I had managed to find a design online that let me build one, draw one on computer paper, and I was set and ready to go. I had the board, a planchette, and candles, and I read some kind of parliamentary procedures to guide the whole session. I waited until I was home alone one day when my single father was working a 24-hour shift. He's a paramedic, then began the session late at night. At first, nothing happened. I had kind of convinced myself nothing would happen. I was, after all, an atheist, so I kind of felt stupid in the beginning about the whole thing. However, after I buckled down and treated it seriously, I kind of felt my hands pulled, I guess. So the board began answering my questions. The questions weren't anything special, mainly just coverall general questions about his name, which was answered correctly, his background, correct, and some other family things. I was having a good old time just chatting with my great-grandfather until something decidedly shitty and horrifying happened. The planchette went nuts. It started flying between Z and O multiple times, repeating the 2 letters for around 15 seconds or so. I asked whether my grandpa was still there, and the planchette moved to no before returning to Zozo repeatedly, which understandably freaked me out. Although I considered stopping the session, my curiosity led me to continue asking questions. It never answered any of my questions. All it said was Zozo repeatedly and things like dead and hell, so I figured I ran into some weird little kink, and I took my hands off the planchette and stopped the session. Apparently, that was mistake number 1. Now, I know that sounds like something out of Paranormal Activity or something, and honestly, I wouldn't believe it if I heard it either, but please trust me when I say it happened and to never ever mess with Ouija boards, because you could get into what I got into. Now, to further my story. For the first week, I heard what sounded like a heavy dog with uncut nails on my hardwood floors in the living room, which was situated right outside my bedroom. It wasn't anything screamingly loud, but it was noticeable enough to draw attention from many of my friends and family who stayed over. I told them it was the house creaking. I would hear the clicks walk very slowly from the guest room, down the hallway, and into the living room, and then right up to my door. They would always stop right outside it, and nothing would come of it. Soon, I became convinced that I was imagining it. Then other stuff happened. Bad stuff. I developed this weird inability to sleep in my room, for reasons unknown. I would randomly wake up and hear quiet sounds from the other end of my room, like a group of people whispering in hushed voices, and I'd see what appeared to be a big black blob in my corner. After 2 weeks of this, something happened that caused me to vacate the room entirely. I was lying in bed and trying to sleep when I heard the now familiar sound of whispers coming from the opposite side of the room. I tried to ignore it and play it off as air conditioning or something and attempted to go back to sleep, but I felt what seemed to be a finger being dragged down the side of my stomach to the middle of my back. I was lying on my side, the prey reflex took over, and I went completely still, waiting for whatever was happening to stop, when, and I swear to whatever being or formula rules over us, I felt something grab my ducking leg and pull it off the bed. I freaked the duck out. Naturally, I left my room and decided never to sleep there again. But I had to sleep on the couch, which caused more issues. Late at night, I'd wake up with scratches on my arms and back, and I'd hear the claw sound running down the hall to my guest room. Many times I'd turn over and see my door cracked open only to see it close on its own. It was a sliding door, so no way it was air currents. I looked into everything I could. I was freaking the duck out about everything, and I didn't know what to do, but I didn't tell anyone until it culminated in one big scary event. I was home alone at like 2 p.m. on Sunday, Dad was working, blah blah blah. I went to the garage to get a frozen pizza from our freezer so I could eat lunch/dinner, and our garage was a separate building about 15 to 20 feet away from my house. No biggie. I left for about 45 seconds, and when I returned, everything was as it had been. Ducking. Open. Everything on hinges or that slid was opened. Everything was open, including my oven, fridge, all of my cabinets, and drawers. I told my dad I had to leave for a school project and slept at a friend's house. I wasn't staying in that hell cabin. So I left and shared everything with one of my best friends from that time, a year after the incident occurred, who was naturally skeptical. He didn't believe a word, so I forced him to come with me the next day so I could show him. He showed up, and absolutely nothing happened. He was there all day, and not a single thing happened, which infuriated me to no end. So, being the bright kid I was, I decided to hold yet another Ouija session, but with him there so he could see. The occasion was at about 1 a.m., if memory serves. At first, nothing happened. The board remained silent, and the planchette stayed still. In fact, the planchette never moved. However, we had lit 3 candles, which were in glass cup things, and they had been used a nice amount before this session. They weren't dead, but they weren't really new. So these candles, all at once, exploded. I'm not even ducking with you. Suddenly, the glass that held the candles exploded, scattering shards all over my table, chairs, and floor. We had been buying these candles for years, and the explosion never happened. So we cleaned it up, stumblingly blessed it as best we could, and retreated to another friend's house to mull over what had happened. We moved not a month later for different reasons, and that was the last I ran into the problems. Easily the worst 9 or so months of my life, because it was constant fear. The first time I've actually seen something creepy. This happened like I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was late at the time. I've just gotten out of the shower, and for some reason, I've just had an odd feeling. Like one I haven't felt before. So I decided to go check on my brother's dog, Sella. He just got her not so long ago, and she was a gift from my dad. Anyways, I went downstairs and wandered around, trying to shake off the odd feeling. So I went to eat some cereal before I went to check on the dog because I was hungry and it was late. When I was done eating, I went to check on the dog, making sure she was okay. I looked out of the glass door to see her, and she was just standing, like she always does because she's lonely. I look at her, but I noticed the backyard light flickering a bit. Which was weird, and I noticed she was looking at something. So I went to look at what she was looking at, and I saw a black figure in my neighbor's backyard, on top of their shed. The black figure moved down and went to the side of the shed, glancing at me and the dog. I felt so uneasy about this. I did want to leave her out there, all by herself. So I zoomed all the way upstairs and told my mom, "Hey, can I get cells from outside?" And my mom said, yeah. Then I zoomed back downstairs, opened the backyard door and sat down to put her collar on. But when I was out there, the black figure wasn't there anymore. But I still felt uneasy, so I hurried up and got her inside to my brother's room. If she were my dog, I would never let her outside again. Thanks for listening. Creepy house. This story is about a house in a small town in Ohio. Naming the town could give away my identity, and I hate doing that online. When I was about 4 years old, my aunt and uncle bought a house that had a strange history, but I never got the story completely straight. I had heard that a young girl died in a fire there, but then I was told by someone else that she didn't die, so I really have no accurate history on the house. When I was a kid, I spent lots of time at this house with my cousin. We played in the enormous basement all of the time. Creepy side note, there was a shower stall in the basement that I was told was a hunter's shower so someone could clean up a kill. Anyway, my uncle was a very well-respected businessman and always had clients over. A little girl started showing up and playing with my cousin and me in the basement, and one day after she had been away for a while, we asked my uncle, "When will your client's daughter be back to play with us again?" He looked at us like we were insane and asked what we were talking about. We asked, "When will the little girl who was coming and playing with us in the basement be back?" He said, "You guys are mistaken. There has not been any little girl playing with you. None of my clients bring children. My older male cousin used to mess with us by rolling a ball into my cousin's room. One day he did so, and the ball went under her bed. We looked for it, and it wasn't there. We found it a couple of days later on the roof. When I got older, teens, I had the most memories. My uncle died in the house when I was around 12, and you could always feel a sensation like he was there near the back door. He used the back door a lot because his business was centered in the garage of the house, so he was in and out a lot to work. One night when I was 15 or 16, my cousin and I were at the house alone. My aunt and her husband had gone to visit family in PA. I remember that there was a horrible snowstorm that week because they were delayed coming back to Ohio. We were watching TV in the living room and started hearing voices through a heater vent from the basement. We muted the TV and still heard the voices along with a music box. We were way too afraid to check the basement, but we did go check the laundry chute in the bathroom. The chute led to the basement, and all the lights were off and it was quiet, but through the heater vent it sounded like there was a party going on. We heard our names being called in the house quite often, even when it was only the two of us there. We would hear someone yell our names, seriously, yell them. The creepiest memory I have of the house is one of my last memories of the house. I was about 21 when my aunt decided to sell the house because it was too big for her. I was staying the night there with my cousin, and we had a habit of going downstairs to use the restroom together, because we were terrified. One of us would wait on the stairs while the other went to the potty. I used the restroom while she waited, and then it was her turn while I waited. As I sat, the stairs were directly by the kitchen door. A little girl was standing in the doorway to the kitchen, and she looked directly at me and said, "Hello." I responded, "What are you doing awake?" And then I froze. There shouldn't have been any children at the house that night. My cousin came from the bathroom and looked at me and said, "Run." I did lol. When we got to her room, I asked her why she told me to run, and she said because the look on my face scared her. I told her about the little girl, and she freaked out. Oddly, the little girl matched the description of the little girl who used to play with us in the basement. She was wearing a light-colored dress and had long brown pigtails in her hair. I hope you all enjoy my story of my Aunt Jenny's house. Unfortunately, this is true. This is just the beginning for me. I started my job as a care assistant in a nursing home in 2019. The home used to be an old orphanage, which explained the noises of children laughing and crying and also the noise of balls bouncing and little footsteps. There are 4 floors in the nursing home, and each floor and the staff and most residents working on those floors would often see the lady in white or a woman in black. There are multiple stories of staff sharing their own experiences with each other, but this was mine. One particular shift I started my day with the usual routine, coffee, and made my way to start with the first room. As I was walking into the room, I saw a woman dressed in a long, black, old-fashioned dress slowly come out of the room next door. I rubbed my eyes as my heart sank, and she was gone. I carried on my usual routine, and the lady I was seeing at the time said, "That woman has been in here again." I asked what woman she was talking about, knowing full well I had just seen her and that I was shitting myself. She then went on to tell me that when she comes, it's either me or one of my neighbors that has to go. I was confused and scared and carried on asking her as many questions about this woman as I could. The lovely lady didn't speak for the rest of my time in her room. So later that day I spoke about it with another member of staff who had been there longer. She said when the woman in black is seen by the residents, there is a death within a week or 2. At first I was like, am I going to freaking die? I've seen her? She said no, she feeds off the vulnerable and the weak. This woman makes herself known, she shows herself as and when she wants. A good few days went by, and I was in the lift going to the very top floor, which was where the children were most heard. The lady in white was mainly seen up there. I believe she protects the children still. As the lift stopped at the top floor and as the doors began to open, I heard what I could only describe as a woman whispering very angrily down my ear. It was fast, strong, and quick. The hairs on my neck stood still. I could hear my own heartbeat hitting my chest. I just knew it was her. I remember being in the dining area on the top floor. It was super quiet towards the end of our shift, as most of the residents were independent on that particular unit, so the doors would be closed and you had some time to make a coffee and do paperwork without anyone really needing help or assistance. I'm waiting for the kettle to boil, and I heard what I can only describe as furniture being moved around by a rugby team, but it was coming from the attic. No one had access to the attic except maintenance, but most night staff would hear running up and down, balls bouncing, children whispering and playing. I unplugged the kettle and ran towards the window of the dining room, which was facing the front of the building. I could see an ambulance was turning into the entrance of the building. All the noise had now stopped. I wondered who the ambulance could have been for, as no one that I knew of was poorly at the time. It's time to clock out of my shift, and I ask our senior member of staff who needed the ambulance. The lovely lady who I had seen a few days before when I saw the woman in black had passed away unexpectedly. I left work thinking about what had happened and thought over and over in my head that my lovely old lady knew it would be her or one of her neighbors, as she called the other residents. My next shift was on the top floor again. I began doing a walk-around check, which is routine. As I checked on one of our gentlemen, who was fairly new to the building and still settling in, he called me into his room and asked if I could tell the lady in the white gown to stop standing outside his bedroom with her children. Again, my heart dropped, and my face surely said it all. I asked him what time she had been standing outside his bedroom. He said he fell asleep at around 10 p.m. in his armchair and woke feeling cold and uncomfortable. He said he glanced at the door to see a lady in a white gown with some small children around her just staring into the bedroom for a couple of minutes until they turned to the right side of the corridor. The right side of the corridor on that unit leads to the maintenance door that goes up to the attic. I did ask him what time this was, and he told me it was 2:45 a.m. Anyways. So after having a mental breakdown and walking away from this bedroom, I carried on with all routine checks, and there was me and another staff member on the unit that day. After lunch I was standing outside the dining room talking to the girl I was working with, and she said, "Can you hear that?" I said, "What?" She said, "That woman crying." We stopped speaking, and I listened very carefully, and I could hear a woman crying as if she was heartbroken, like sobbing. Then, within a split second, silence. I began to tell my work friend what had been going on and what the gentleman had also told me this morning. She was freaked out, to say the least. After a while, she took her break, and I was cracking down on some paperwork in the office. I had the radio on, but only quietly. I noticed my battery life was draining so much. As I was writing, the radio began to switch stations rapidly, and the volume was going up and down, up and down. The same cry was coming through the radio that we had heard just before. I literally dropped my pen, left my phone, and dashed from the office, and just as I had gotten out of there, the gentleman in 417 shouted to me, "I told you to tell her." So, skip to a couple of months down the line. The gentleman in 417, his health started to decline, so unfortunately he wasn't very mobile and wasn't very independent, so he was soon to leave the unit to go down onto the bottom unit, which is the converted basement. He often mentioned the lady in white and her children. Sometimes he would tell me that she'd been there again, and what I had noticed is he would say this sort of stuff the night before or on the night of someone sadly passing in the building. Which I obviously wouldn't find out until the day before when I'd come on shift. So did the lady in white gather the children together as she knew the woman in black would be around for someone passing. I've had 2 years of thinking this shit through and trying to make sense of it all. 417 ended up moving down to the very bottom unit eventually, and when staff clock out and leave the back way, they pass his room. I was leaving work, and I decided to go the back way this particular night as I clocked off at 8, and I shouted good night and waved to him. He shouted my name, so I said, "Yes, is there anything I can do for you?" He said, "How come you didn't tell me there's a woman in black down here?" My heart. This isn't my story but my uncle's story. He told me this story a few days ago since we were sharing stories and experiences with each other. I asked him eventually about what the creepiest/scariest thing that's ever happened to him was. What I'm about to tell you is his story. It's the weirdest and most disturbing thing that he's ever experienced. This story takes place back in the late 90s when my uncle was attending college at Sac State University at the time. During his time there, he would often walk around the campus to get his steps in for the day. On other days, he would sit underneath a tree or on the tables at the outdoor dining area to chat with his friends or finish up his schoolwork. One day while he was sitting under a tree doing his schoolwork is when it happened. My uncle was minding his business when he saw someone walking towards him in his peripheral vision. He didn't think much of it at first, as he thought it was someone just walking past him. He then noticed that the person was much closer to him, being about 15 feet away from him. He hears a woman's voice say hello to him, which makes him turn around to see who it is. To this day, he says when he looked at her, she was probably one of the most drop-dead gorgeous ladies he's ever seen. He describes her with vibrant blue eyes, long flowing blonde hair, wearing a pretty dark green dress, and overall having siren-like beauty. He continued staring at her in awe and confusion for a moment until he found his voice. He soon asked her if she needed any help with anything, which she replied yes, and that she wanted to chat with him. With my uncle being single at the time, he saw no harm in talking to some girl. He did, however, feel like something was off with her, but he couldn't exactly tell what it was. He decides to talk with her but to be cautious about it. He asks the lady for her name, and she replies that it's Kelly. My uncle also asks Kelly what she wants to talk about, and she replies that she thinks he's cute and wants to hang out with him if he doesn't mind. My uncle nervously agrees, and they begin to talk with each other. My uncle says that, surprisingly, they had pretty good chemistry and shared a lot in common when they hung out together that day. Kelly asks my uncle if he wants to hang out with her again, which he responds with a yes. My uncle asked her if it would be alright if they hung out at the mall, which she happily agreed. Kelly hugs him and says that she can't wait to hang out with him again. Fast forward a few days later, my uncle goes to the mall and sees that Kelly was waiting for him there. They spent a few hours at the mall, and everything went over smoothly with no problems. My uncle and Kelly continued to hang out with no problem until the third week. During one of their times when they were together, Kelly asked him if he would be interested in wanting to join a special underground club that she's in. My uncle asks her what it was about and where it's located. Kelly explained to him that it's a friendship club about getting closer with your friends and building deeper bonds through fun activities. My uncle asks what activities, and she says she doesn't want to tell as it'll ruin the surprise she has for him. He asked her when the club meeting would be happening, and she replied by saying a few days from now. She also gives him the address and says that she can't wait to see him. My uncle had looked up the address that night when he got home and had seen it was in a sketchy part of downtown. Fast forward to the day of the club meeting, and my uncle made his way to the downtown area. He found the place where the supposed meeting was to be held but immediately got bad vibes from it. The address had led him to an old, decrepit, run-down building that looked like it hadn't been used in years. He knocks on the door, and a man wearing a dark blue robe answers the door. My uncle says that he's here for the meeting and asked if Kelly is here. The man gave him an odd look, studying him, and told him to come in and that Kelly would be there soon. Upon entering the building, my uncle said it was rather nice on the inside but was dimly lit in there. He said there were these weird lights on the wall and that there were 5 other people in the room wearing the same dark blue robes. My uncle looks ahead and notices a long corridor with a row of weird lamps on both sides. The corridor seemed to stretch on for quite a bit until he noticed that it went down. The robed man tells my uncle to follow him and that the meeting will start soon once everything is settled. The robed man leads him to the end of the corridor, which leads down a short flight of stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, there was a small path that led to an old wooden door. The path that led to the door was practically pitch black. My uncle had contemplated turning around and walking away, but something told him not to. They went downstairs and through the door, which led down to another corridor with the same weird lamps. My uncle remembered saying how this corridor had so many doors along with many turns that he swore he was walking through a maze of some sort. The both of them stopped at one of the doors, which the man had opened, and told my uncle to step in. My uncle peeked his head in the room and felt his heart skip a beat when he saw what was in there. He said the room was empty except for an old, wooden chair sitting dead center of the room along with a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling that barely lit up the room. The robed man told my uncle to have a seat, to wait there for about 10 to 15 minutes, and that someone would come and get him and that Kelly should also be arriving at the same time as well. My uncle reluctantly stepped in and went to sit on the chair. The door closed, and he said he'll be back soon. My uncle had gotten up from the chair and decided to explore the room to see if he could find anything. He was looking around until he noticed something on one of the walls. He looked and thought it was either some random stain or drawing until he realized it wasn't. As he got closer to it, he saw that someone had painted something on the wall with black paint. He looked at it a little more carefully this time and felt his blood run cold when he saw what it was. There, on one of the walls, was a pentagram symbol that someone had made with what appeared to be some dry blood marks as well. At that point, my uncle had seen enough and knew he had to get out of there immediately. My uncle opened the door carefully and as quietly as he could and began to quickly make his way out of there. While navigating the corridors, he heard a very loud and frantic pounding from one of the doors. He stopped momentarily to see if it was anyone that needed help, but there was no yelling, screaming, or cries for help. He wanted to investigate, but his gut told him to ignore it and to get out of there. He eventually found the door, went through it and up the stairs, and sprinted out of the door. Oddly enough, the 5 other robed men he saw earlier weren't there, so he was relieved that he didn't have to deal with them since he said he wouldn't have known what he would have done at that moment. During the rest of his time at college, he never saw or heard of Kelly again or whatever her real name was. My uncle never called the cops and regrets it, as he'll never know if they got caught, who those people really were, and what they were going to do to him. My uncle firmly believes that he was going to either be initiated or sacrificed by some blood cult or satanic cult. He believes that Kelly was used as a lure in order to gain trust and to lower anyone's guard so as to lure my uncle or any other unfortunate person. After that experience, he didn't go downtown for a very long time afterwards out of fear of being spotted by one of those cult members. My uncle is forever grateful that he was fortunate enough to escape, as he doesn't know and shudders at the thought of what would have happened to him if he'd stuck around or if he hadn't escaped. My creepiest Ouija board experience. My freshman year of high school, my friends and I were really into playing with Ouija boards. I was always skeptical of whether or not they actually worked until this experience. My friends and I had gotten word that a few people at our school had started a paranormal club. I know it sounds stupid, but this was actually a thing at my high school. We were all pretty excited to hear about this since we were all into that type of stuff. A group of about 9 of us decided to go to the first meeting held after school one day. When we showed up to the room where the meeting was held, we were surprised to find that it was just us and a few others, as well as the 2 girls that had started the club and the teacher chaperoning the meeting. One of the girls who started the club announced that for our first meeting we were going to be watching an episode of Ghost Adventures since it had some good paranormal encounters. My friends and I were pretty bummed that we were just watching a TV show. We expected to be doing something totally different. About 10 minutes into the episode, I and 4 of my other friends got bored, and since we were only 14 to 15 at the time and couldn't leave until our parents picked us up, we decided to go hang out in one of our favorite teacher's rooms. His room was across the hall from the classroom the paranormal club was being held in. We told the teacher we were at the paranormal club across the hall and how we joined because we were into playing Ouija boards. My friend thought we should play one in his room since she knew how to make them. Our teacher was reluctant at first but eventually just let us do it. My friend grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and scribbled down yes, no, and the letters and numbers. We got a makeshift planchette. I think we used, like, a quarter or something. We sat down at a table and started the game. We asked it, "Are you there?" And it slowly slid to yes. Then we asked, "What is your name?" It first slid to D, then O, then N. We quickly slid goodbye, since this wasn't our first time coming in contact with a spirit named Don. So a little backstory, this Don spirit had come through on multiple occasions when my friend Megan would play the Ouija board. He would say he was one of her family members who had passed, but upon asking her parents if they had a deceased relative named Don, they assured her they did not. So whenever Don came on the Ouija board, we knew to just slide to goodbye and not talk to him, since we thought he was bad news. Right as we told Don goodbye, the paranormal club leaders burst into the classroom saying they had been looking for us and asked why we were ditching their meeting. One of them walked closer to where we were sitting and saw the Ouija board. She started scolding us, telling us not to mess with Ouija boards because they are bad spirits. We assured her that we knew what we were doing since we had done this so many times before. The girl sighed and let us get on with our game. She turned around to leave the room, but before she walked out, she told us about a girl who went to our high school back in the 90s or something and said she died nearby. She asked us if we were going to play with the Ouija board and if we could find out this girl's name. We agreed, and both girls left the room. I'd like to emphasize the fact that none of us knew this girl's name, let alone that there was a girl who died near the school. We thought it would be pretty cool if we could find out her name through the board but didn't expect much. We then asked the Ouija board again, "Is anyone there?" It stalled for a minute and then slowly crept to yes. I asked something along the lines of there was a student who died here, what was her name? After a long pause, the game piece began to move. It first slid to S, then A, then R, then A, then H. Sarah? We all froze for a moment. My friend Megan broke the silence eventually by asking the board, "What's your name?" It spelled out DON. We all slid the planchette goodbye as fast as we could. We then started joking about Megan's so-called relative, Don, and how he was always trying to mess with us. A few minutes passed, and the leader from the paranormal club came in our classroom again from across the hall. She said, "Hey guys, we did some research on the internet, and we figured out the girl's name. It was Sarah." All our jaws dropped. I immediately started getting goosebumps. I'd like to remind you that none of us had any prior knowledge of this girl who passed away since it happened about 20 years prior. We told her that Sarah was the name we got when we asked the Ouija board. She got excited and told me and my friends to follow her across the hall. We looked at the computer she had been doing her research on, and sure enough, Sarah's obituary was pulled up on the screen. A car struck her as she attempted to cross the main road near our school. The girl also said, and this chilled me to my core, that she found another obituary for a janitor who worked at my high school in the 90s and ended themselves. His name? Don. 2012. June, around the time of the solstice. Yellowstone. I was an employee in the park and had just wrapped up a 15-mile hike up and back from some mountains. My legs were achy and tired. Moreover, my whole body felt warm and radiant, worn and ready for sleep. I strolled along the half-mile dusty road, which led to my car and a small group of abandoned overnighters' vehicles. I was so relieved to see my car, Beaker, waiting there faithfully for me. Twilight was setting in heavily, and I felt deeply satisfied with my day. I unlocked my door and swung my daypack into my passenger seat, hit the ignition, and duck. My car was unresponsive. Dead. Totally deadzo. I had left my lights on. Shit. Duck. But, at least it's summertime, and cold won't kill me. People forget this about Yellowstone, but parts of it are very legitimately remote. The elements can and will kill you, and there are multiple fatalities in the park every year: drownings, falls, gourings, maulings, burns, exposure. They all exist as real and palpable risks, and all in a place where cell phone reception is spotty at best. It is woefully remote. There is only one single fuzzy radio station, everything else is static. There is no TV and no internet. And my cell phone had 5% battery left on it. I rallied. I'll walk to the hilltop and try to get a call out, I thought. My nervousness helped my tired muscles get me moving, and I got lucky. After the first few failed tries and some dropped calls, I placed a call to the park ranger dispatch, and he said that he would swing by and to wait by my car. I trudged back to Beaker and awaited his rescue. 30 minutes later, I heard the gravel popping as a vehicle slowly crawled into the trailhead parking lot, and it was the ranger's cruiser. He said he didn't have jumpers with him, but he dispatched the wrecker crew to me, and they would be with me in an hour and a half. He said he had a few other campsites to secure and excused himself, since darkness was setting in, and he promised to return in an hour or two to check on me after he had secured the other campsites. I thanked him, and he left. I popped my hood and set my hood up as a signal to the wrecker to see me in my car in the dark, got in my car, and began a sleepy wait for the mechanic. About 45 minutes passed slowly by. There was no moon that night, and the sky had clouded over, making it a darker night than typical at Yellowstone. Sometimes the stars are so bright that they illuminate the surroundings, but not tonight. It was black. Feeling both still and bored, I attempted to crank my ignition several times, but my car only produced a few weak clicks before falling silent. That's when I heard the crackling on the gravel road again and was so happy to see the wrecker kicking up dust as it crawled towards me. Except it wasn't the wrecker. It was a large pickup. The pickup truck slowly pulled into the campsite. Very, very slowly. Take your foot off the gas slowly. As it did, it panned the span of the parking area with its brights on. Ranger? I wondered, blinded from the brights. My eyes adjusted. No. Not a ranger vehicle. It had certainly seen me. I was sitting in the car with my hood up, looking foolish and uninterested. The pickup rolled ever so slowly into the parking area and holed up on the far side of the row of vehicles I was in. And then, some questionable things began to happen. I heard the truck shut off. My stomach tightened. Then, it turned on again. It revved its engine, loudly. It roared forward about 10 feet, then reversed back into the space slowly, then forward, then back. This pattern went inexplicably on for about 5 minutes. I felt my body clicking into a very aware mode. I adjusted my rear view to be able to try to see my rear passenger side better. I readied my daypack, zipping pockets back shut. For some reason, I still had my seatbelt on. I smoothly unclicked it and unlocked my driver's door, ready to run if I was approached. I'll take the grizzlies and mountain lions over anyone coming at me. The truck was still ritually pulling forward and backing in. It was so ducking odd. I could make no other sense of it than that the driver and whoever else was in the truck had seen me and were trying to intimidate me. Then the truck shut off and did not come back on. I could not see worth shit, it was so damn dark outside. Then I heard a faint car door shut. I listened hard and didn't hear any more, but I couldn't be sure. I thought about ducking down and trying to hide in my car, but if the person approached me directly and or if they were armed, I would be ducked. Having undoubtedly caught their attention, I made a crucial choice. I decided I would be assertive. The person, a man, a silhouette in the blackness, with a white or tan cowboy hat up top, tall, perhaps 6 feet, and middle-aged in gait, sauntered slowly down the row of cars towards mine. I continuously glanced into my rearview mirror, vigilantly avoiding distractions and potential ambushes from others. The man had a steady walk and strolled unaffectedly about 20 or 15 feet in front of the cars. He appeared at complete ease, nearly happy, and that made me exceedingly more uncomfortable. His path brought him nearly in front of my car. I breathed in and steeled myself. I looped my daypack on my right shoulder and clutched my canister of bear spray in my right hand. I had the safety off, and it jangled. It was glowing faintly in the dark, clanking against the canister. My left hand popped my door, and I threw my legs out and stood up, partially covered by my open door, stood, and called to him. "Excuse me," I called. As he slowed his gait, something about the casual way he did it appeared nearly interested and amused. He stopped his stroll and turned towards me. "Excuse me, I said it again. Do you happen to have any jumpers? He surveyed. Then, what? He asked. Jumper cables. Do you happen to have any? He paused and seemed to take stock. He was slow in his replies. No, I don't believe I do. He replied. Okay, well, thanks anyway, I said. He stood there for a moment, facing me. I could only tell from seeing his hat brim turned towards me, then turned and continued his casual walk towards the trailhead marker and map sign. He stood out there for about 5 minutes, just standing there. He hadn't brought a light, or a pack, or anything. It was too dark to read, and there aren't any lights in Yellowstone's backcountry. He pretended to read the displayed map and sign at the trailhead. He surveyed through, or pretended to. Then, he turned and began to walk back in front of the row of cars, approaching me again. My skin was cold, and my breathing was rapid at this point. I knew he was full of shit and had no business being in the parking lot. He knew he looked weird at this point and also seemed to give delightfully few ducks. He neared my car again, and as he strolled in front, he remarked. Nice night out, he said this while stopping about 15 feet in front of me. He was so confident. He made me mad, it was like he was savoring my fear. My voice reflected both my panic and my anger. What are you doing here? My words knifed the air. He could hear the tightness in my voice, but I was also keeping it locked down. He calculated, and he advanced towards me. I came to check out the trailhead, so do you have anyone coming? Shit. He was full of shit. No one does that at this time of night. He was sizing me up. In fact, as he awaited my reply, he took a step towards me. Yeah, I'm waiting on the wrecker and ranger. They said they'd be by in about 5 minutes now. It was a lie. I still had to wait for another half an hour before I saw either of them again. But he didn't know that. To underscore my point, I stood tall and slung my large canister of grizzly spray into my left hand, aimed at him. I couldn't see if he saw it or not. He took another step towards me. He was now possibly less than 15 feet away, and perhaps as close as 10 feet. Are you sure you don't need any help? He offered. He stepped again. I raised my canister and jangled the safety mechanism. Its noise was impossible to ignore. I knew he'd seen it. Nah, those guys should be by any minute, but, thanks. I replied. Damn my polite Catholic upbringing. I had braced myself. I knew the next words from my mouth were going to break the social contract apart with if you come any closer, I will spray the duck out of you. Back off. He was that close now. He paused and weighed his options. Then, he casually turned and began to ease back towards his truck. He said something, but I was so hyper-focused on his body that I can't remember what he said. I just watched his body slowly merge back into the darkness. I heard his truck door slam. His truck turned back on. He repeated the strange ritual of revving his engine, rolling forward, and then reversing for at least 5 minutes. Then, practically in neutral, he rolled out of the lot, down the dirt road, his truck slipping immediately behind the small draws and hills. I now acted on instinct. I grabbed my pack and spray and bailed out of the car. I slinked quietly across the lot and crept around the far side of a long horse trailer, waiting, listening, and seeing if he would come back. Time passed. My heart began to slow back down. 20 or 30 minutes crawled by. I began to accept that he wasn't coming back. I waited for noise. I saw headlights. It was the wrecker. I got my jump and got back home. Along the way I got intermittent cell reception. I had a few voicemails from my best friend. She said she just had a very bad feeling and called me trying to reach me. Her voice was nervous in her voicemails, and she literally never panics. Weird. While hiking the hills I used to live by a few years ago, I came across some strange rituals a couple of times, which I soon learned were satanic. I'm talking about perfect circumferences of white and red rose petals, big candles, and bottled beer. There are about 20 or 30 white flags around the place. And dead, headless chickens in the middle, or some poor stray dog without legs. Horrible stuff. As a curious child, I became very interested in demonology and similar topics. I never was or will be a satanic worshipper or anything extreme. I simply wanted to understand what was behind this whole secret taboo world of black magic, demons, sacred texts, and rituals. Was this shit for real? Why did some people believe in this? What was there about it that made society look at it like it was something wrong? As I dug deeper and deeper into whatever kind of material I could get my hands on, and believe me, I was an avid reader, I stumbled on the ancient texts of King Solomon. It did seem like the real deal, as real as a 16-year-old would find. After reading diagonally through the text, which basically said why Satan was the true Lord, Master, or whatever, I found a passage that stated that the worshipper should read it out loud in order to reach him. I thought, meh, bored, don't really care. So I read something that was along the lines of, "Oh, great true Lord, hear your servant. I come to you with my soul open and knees on the ground. Hear my plea. Grant me my true desires in this life, and I shall follow you forever. Oh, great Lord Satan, show yourself to this servant, show me your power," etc., etc. You get the idea. And yes, absolutely nothing happened, obviously. However, to my surprise, there was another passage following this one. It said that if nothing happened after reading the first passage, this one should also be read out loud. Only this time, it was more of an apology. "Oh, great, true Lord, forgive this servant for calling upon you when I was not ready to receive you. I only ask for a sign of your existence, a messenger, something, that will make me believe that the Lord has not forgotten his followers, no matter how small." The moment I say the last word, almost to the second, someone knocks on my bedroom door. I have a minor brain freeze. I turn my chair around, facing the door. "Come in." It's my little brother, age 9, the cutest little shit in the world. He opens the door only a bit, pops his head inside, and, while grinning, asks me how I, his favorite devil, was feeling. One of those long, horrid chills went down my back. He had never called me that, anything like that at all. Oh my ducking God, there was no way he heard me saying whatever. I was saying it out loud, but not loud enough for someone to hear it from the corridor. Even less so for him. I repeatedly asked him why on earth he called me that, and he said that he felt like it. And since that day, he never felt like calling me devil again. Perhaps I became so frightened that I promptly erased all the demonology-related content from my computer, vowing never to read anything similar again. Even if I don't entirely believe in it, I'll stay out of it. I lived in Pennsylvania until I was 1 month shy of being 12. I know that exact date because you had to be 12 to hunt in PA, and I was looking forward to it. Anyways, we moved to Florida, and I get to hunt down here too, so that's okay. I had a few good friends that lived right down the street from me. We lived out in the country. My address was literally 1691 Halves_road. Middle of nowhere. So we'd hang out at my buddy's place, or we'd go up this hill for about half a mile until we reached the burn pile and cabin at the top. It really was a basic cabin. Outhouse. No lights. Nothing. We'd hang out there, using it as a fort for Nerf battles, manhunt, CTF, etc. Well, one night my friend invited a few of his friends/cousins up to the cabin so we could roast marshmallows and play manhunt. There were about 13 of us to start, but the number slowly went down to 10 by nightfall. So we played manhunt 5 versus 5 in the dark. Around 11 p.m. we were in the middle of a game, and 2 of my friends had hung back with me because we were the quickest ones. We realized that there were only 3 of us left on our team and that we hadn't captured anyone from their team. We tried to make a jailbreak and lost my friend, we'll call him F. It was just myself and another friend that we'll call L. L and I were 100 yards from the other team, and they had 3 of our 5 players now in their jail. They began to press our side more and mess with us until one of them told us we were cheating. L and I looked at each other, unable to figure out why. Our side had about 1/4 of it covered heavily in trees. The other side was about the same, with both wooded areas near the back of the sides. At one point when we were chasing someone off our side, I saw L and I running in the same direction and someone on the other side of L. I quickly cut behind L and intended to surprise the other person and nab them on our side. I was probably the fastest person there, and I didn't want to be on the team to capture nobody. Once I emerged from behind L's trajectory, we were both running. I saw absolutely no one. There were no trees, scarecrows, or anything else that I could have mistaken for a person. I surmised that there had to be someone from the other team hiding behind our lines, waiting for us to cross over and then tag us there. Well, the game ended up dwindling down to us with 2 left and the other side with 4. We capped 1 person, and then all parties were exhausted. I asked the other team, mostly L's cousins, who was behind the line waiting to cap us. No one claimed responsibility. I figured it was someone trying to mess with us. Back at the cabin, we start cooking hot dogs and marshmallows over a fire. We were all 10-13-ish, with one person being maybe 15, older cousin, so we were drinking soda and not beer. Note, if this had been beer and I'd been older, I'd just chalk this up to booze. All 10 of us were around the fire when we saw someone coming up the hill. It's hard to see outside in the dark when you've been staring at a fire for a while, but at least 4 of us had seen the person, so we figured it was one of the people who left coming back or someone new. After about half an hour, no one came up. We went and looked and found no one. Being the intelligent young kids we were, we decided to investigate further. It's summer, after 12 a.m., and we're out playing with fire and flashlights looking for a mystery person. Yeah, we were not honor students. We went to the path that led down the hill and could clearly see my friend's house in the distance. They left the outside lights on for the dogs, and no one in between. Someone was trying to mess with the group, so they ran into the woods and came out directly on top of us, scaring the crap out of everyone. After we all changed our pants and regrouped, we headed back to the cabin only to see someone on the very far side of the clearing. There were 3 of us with flashlights, and all of us attempted to illuminate this person, but we were too far away to get a good look. As soon as we lit him/her up, he or she disappeared into the woods. Okay, then, now a few of us are freaking out. 6 people decide to go down to my friend's house to spend the rest of the night where the axe murderer from hell won't be able to get them. Since they have 6 and the 4 of us who decided to rough it are only 4, the group of 6 got 2 flashlights. I was the only one left with 1. We decided to figure out who this was. We thought L's uncle, who was only 10 years older than him, was just messing with us. We knew his place was less than a mile from where we were, big extended family, large family plot of land.
F, one of L's cousins, going to call him C, and I began to walk across the clearing.
Once we were about 40 feet from the edge of the woods, we could hear someone moving around in the brush. Not stomping or anything, but very carefully moving through the fallen sticks and underbrush, trying to make as little noise as possible. We figured it was L's uncle. We'll refer to him as Uncle J. So we split up again, and 2 people waited in the clearing, F and L's cousin, and I and L went into the woods to try to flush out Uncle J. We figured F and C could see okay from the clearing, and to be honest, they actually could. L and I eventually were about 50 feet into the woods, further than we thought we'd need to go, when we heard this low rumble noise. This is one of those times when I regretted trying to act macho. L and I kind of looked at each other to make sure it was neither of us rumbling, and basically just stopped dead in our tracks. I shined the flashlight up in the direction of the noise, directly away from the clearing and the fire, and couldn't see anything. There was just nothing there. It was, to this day, one of the most eerie noises I've ever heard, like a noise a Halloween decoration would have made, but real. We stayed about 50 feet into the woods, never venturing much further in, and searched the general area. We were unable to find anything. After about half an hour, it's now past 2 a.m., we heard a noise at the clearing's edge and turned around. I anticipated that F and C would arrive to investigate why we were taking so long.
However, instead of F and C, I see a single person who is mostly hidden behind a tree, watching us.
I've never not wanted to shine my flashlight on something before that moment. If it was dark, I wanted to see what it was. But in the distance, well past the shadowy character, I could see F and C milling about by the fire. I had this awful feeling that there was no way Uncle J was being this creepy. I would rather not see who it was, and I actually wanted to get away from this person. What I mean is that the hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. L must have seen it too because he started slowly backing further into the woods. We circled the shadowy figure and returned to the clearing. After returning to the cabin, we picked up F and C before starting our journey back to L's place. When we were about 100 yards from the cabin, we heard its door slam, and we ducking bolted. When we returned to L's house at the hill's base, we debated calling 911. Was that a trespasser? Or could it have been a family member playfully interacting with us? L went to notify his parents, who we figured would be overjoyed at the premise of being woken up around 3 a.m. by a bunch of sweaty, terrified 11-year-olds. They weren't home. Apparently L's grandfather had a heart attack around 10 p.m. None of us had cell phones, as it was 1998, and so no one had been notified except for L's 19-year-old step-cousin. I never really figured out this relationship tbh, who had drunk himself near blackout drunk as soon as the adults left him in charge of all the younger kids up at the cabin. Seriously, he got reamed the next day by basically every adult in attendance. That meant that Uncle J and basically every other of L's family members who could have been messing with us were at the local hospital with the patriarch of the family, who'd had a mild coronary. At 4 a.m., we knew we couldn't sleep, so we waited for the shadow guy to appear at the hill's base. Less than 10 minutes later, I hear a sound coming from upstairs. The only problem is, there's no upstairs at L's house. There's someone? On the roof. L grabs his pellet gun, because that's going to be super effective, and we go outside, because, we're smart and stuff. We shine every flashlight straight up at the roof and see a completely black silhouette jump off the far side of the house in a mad sprint. The way L's roof was shaped, the part it jumped off of was over 25 high, there was a huge vaulted ceiling in the back room of the house, and the roof was even taller to accommodate for the attic. We watched it run away from the hill and towards the creek, 10 wide and maybe 2 deep, and we followed it until we realized how much faster it was than us. Once it reached the edge of the creek, it stopped and looked back at us. This rumble thing came back, and it jumped the creek, and we lost it. The next day we told Elle's parents, and they informed us that the cabin was being torn down. A cow had been ended in the ducking cabin early that morning, presumably after we left. It could have been a panther. Cows weren't uncommon on that part of the property, but they tended to avoid the people. It could have been a bear, but duck. We never went back up that hill at night. No way, no how. Never saw that thing again. Might not seem like much, but to 11-year-old me, I had a new face for fear. The ghost girl haunting my house. I'm a 16-year-old girl living with both my parents, obviously. Now, I had never been a big believer in the paranormal, but these recent experiences have changed that. It all started about a month ago. I was sitting at the dining table before leaving for school at roughly 7 a.m. It was winter, and up north, it stays pretty dark during the morning. So I was basically eating my breakfast in the dark, not wanting to turn any lights on or wake my family up. In front of me was a small white tea light that requires flicking a switch to turn on, and behind me were 2 more tea lights placed on a small table where we keep all our miscellaneous objects, keys, hats, gloves, etc. As I ate, my sister walked out of her room and down the hall into the dining room, standing roughly 6 feet from where I was eating. She stood there and said, "Good morning." As she did this, the tea light in front of me flickered on, and we both stared at it, then at each other, before beginning to laugh nervously. Then, her eyes began to widen as she looked behind me, slightly horrified. Both tea lights turned on behind me one by one as I turned around to see what she was looking at. But this didn't freak me out too much, though it was odd. That was the first occurrence. Next was an experience my mom had. It was about 9 p.m. on a Saturday night, and my mom sat on the couch watching some Netflix show. My sister, her girlfriend, and I all sat in my sister's room, talking. My mom came to the door and asked what we were doing. We chatted for a bit, and then she returned to her show. Not more than 5 minutes later, she was back with the remote in her hand, and she had an accusatory look on her face. "Okay, which one of you did it?" she asked. "Did what?" inquired my sister, and her girlfriend looked at each other with confused faces. "My show. I had paused it to come talk to you guys, and when I went back out there, the screen was completely frozen. I checked the entire area around the TV and attempted to turn it off, but the remote control was unresponsive. So I took off the back to look, and the batteries and..." Her voice began to sound worried and less accusatory. "And what?" my sister pushed. "The batteries were flipped upside down, shoved in, and all scratched up. We all just stared at each other and felt like we were being watched." The next one also has to do with my mom. She has this special brush that is pretty expensive and is really effective at untangling hair. One day it had gone missing, and my mom was livid. She accused my 2 sisters and me of taking it and made us all search our rooms. But none of us had taken it, and nothing was found in our rooms. Later that night my mom was downstairs in our guest bedroom cleaning and dusting. That's when I heard her yell for us to come downstairs. My 2 sisters and I ran downstairs to see what was wrong, and there she was, standing in the middle of the room, staring at her brush on the floor. Her eyes became serious, and she asked, "Who put this here?" All 3 of us shook our heads. No one knew who or what put the brush down there. Finally, the creepiest thing happened to me just 2 weeks ago. I was on my phone late into the night. I looked at the time and put my phone down. I turned over and tried to fall asleep. Then I heard shuffling from outside my door. From my bed I could see the door was 3/4 open. The angle allowed you to see my parents' bedroom door. There stood someone, peeking in and out of my parents' door. I thought that maybe it was my dad, so I called out to him. When I did so, the figure turned its body to face me. I was looking at what looked to be a female with dark hair and relatively pale skin. Then the figure turned and walked into my parents' bedroom. I got up, panicking, and looked into my parents' room. There they both lay, sleeping soundly. So I figured maybe my sister had gotten up, so I went across the hall to her room. I opened the door, and she was awake, and I asked, "Hey, did you just go into Mom and Dad's room?" She gave me a confused look and shook her head. My stomach dropped, and I gave her a horrified look. "Then who just went into Mom and Dad's room?" She immediately began to freak out, as did I. I crawled into bed with her and stayed with her the rest of the night. Now I see fast, black shadows darting everywhere. At home, at work, at school, or when driving. It's unnerving, and nothing has been the same since that last experience. But whatever is going on, I know it's paranormal, and I have a new outlook on what we don't always see. Creepy sleepover experience. So this story almost sounds fake, but it's not. Last April, when I was 14 years old, I invited a group of 3 friends over for a sleepover at my house, which was the first sleepover I had ever hosted. It started out normal with playing games, taking the bus to Taco Bell for dinner, buying snacks, and watching TV, but when it got to around midnight, we decided to sneak out of my house via the back door and go to the park that's 5 minutes from where I live. We played at the park for about 20 minutes and took some pictures before deciding to head towards the haunted woods nearby, which is our usual hangout place during the day, due to one of my friend's uncles giving us the idea the day prior. Due to always being there, we know it is pretty haunted and has ghosts, and what F says is the demon spirit of a man that ended his own daughter in the woods about 10 years prior. F knows this due to being a protector for young children's spirits and has let the little girl's spirit attach to her. For context, F is a medium and can see and speak to the dead and often tells me where spirits are. It took us about 6 minutes to get to the woods, and when we arrived, we came up with the idea to play hide and seek for a bit. We split into groups of 2, me and L and F and Z. I and L walked away while the other 2 counted. After 5 minutes we felt like we were being watched from the trees around us, but we ignored it, and I played it off as my older brother, 17, who was a miscarriage, just making sure we were safe. We found a hiding spot behind a bench that had a large bush in it. We sat on the ground facing the bush, on the edge of the woods in a massive green area by the main road. At 1 a.m. the game started, and F and Z are now looking for us. 5 minutes later the creepy stuff starts. We hear people talking, but no one is there, and there is movement in the bush and footsteps. We didn't think too much of it due to it being a public area and the weekend, so it could have been some teenagers. After 5 more minutes I see 2 bright flashlights in a clearing in the woods shining at us. Thinking it's our friends, I say to L, looks like we've been found, but after saying I get a phone call from F. I answer F, meet us by the pond now. Me, why? F, just meet us by the pond. Me, alright, I agreed to her request after hearing how scared she sounded, and then I hung up. I and L get up and decide to run, with our flashlights on, across the green since the pond was on the other side of it. I turn around to see if L was close behind me, which she was but more diagonal. My flashlight's light hit something skinny, large, and pale gray on all 4s crawling in an inhuman way in the opposite direction of us. I continue running but faster this time, not wanting to know what it is and thinking it was a skinwalker. We got to the pond, shined our flashlights at our friends to signal it was us, and ran over to them. When we got to them, F told me that when they were looking for me, she felt something wrap its hands around her neck, almost choking her, and say, 1 down, 3 to go. Mac, which is me, is next. Already knowing it was the demon ghost man, she called me. We left the woods quickly and half ran back to my house, snuck back in, saged ourselves, and sat in the living room, which was where we were sleeping for the night. F asked me to come with her up to the bathroom to help her remove her makeup, where she told me what she heard the demon say in the woods. We told my older sister and went to sleep an hour later. We've never been back to the woods at night since. When I was little, my family was extremely poor, and we were evicted from our house. We had nowhere to go, so my mom moved 4 of her kids and herself into a camper trailer. You know the type of camper trailer that people typically buy to travel around the US. It was a sardine can, but we were hoping it was only temporary. The trailer was parked on my grandpa's land, which was given to him for being Native American. I don't know how that works, but anyway, it was in the middle of nowhere, with the nearest neighbor being about a mile away, who were some in-laws. A few weeks after moving in, strange things started to happen. If you have ever been in a camper trailer, they shake like an earthquake if you jump up and down, so you know that they are very unstable. In the dead of night we started to hear scratching on the sides of the camper, like someone running their nails across. It always occurred between 1 a.m. and 3 a.m., and my mom and older sister would run outside and check, and there would be no one outside. This went on for a few days and evolved into the feeling/sound of someone punching the side of the trailer. My mom would go outside and, of course, find nothing. Of course it was pitch black outside because there were no streetlights in the boonies. One evening, around 10 p.m., we were all gathered together, anticipating the return of this phenomenon, when a tremendous bang shook the entire trailer. It felt as though a football player had collided with it at full speed, attempting to overturn it. We are all screaming and crying, but the situation continues to escalate. We're tossed around over and over, and then finally my mom has had enough and runs outside. Right as she steps outside, it stops. It never happened again after that night. It was really ducking creepy. There were no big animals in the area except coyotes, but we had dogs who were gated, and they never sounded the alarm or acted like anything was wrong. I was never happier to move out of a place in my life. My creepy experiences. I've had quite a few weird occurrences happen to me throughout my life and would like a place to share them. Now I've moved back and forth between the states of Alabama and Iowa for basically all of my life, and I got a few new experiences in both places every time I moved. Well, the first experience I had, I was about 9 years old and had just moved to Iowa and was living with my grandparents. Now this happened on the first night I was there. My parents and grandparents wanted to go to the bar for the night and had my brother, sister, and me sleep in my grandparents' bed since we hadn't gotten anything set up yet. Well, after they left and I at least was trying to sleep, my siblings started to argue, so I figured I'd find somewhere else to sleep. My grandparents' house was 2 stories on the side of a hill, and looking at it from the front, you could only see the top half, but looking at the back, you could see both halves. Their room was on the bottom half in the further back part of the house. The way the top half of the house is set up is you walk in the door and you're in the living room, keep walking straight and you'll be in the kitchen, but right before the kitchen there's a hallway that leads to a bathroom and 2 bedrooms. Well, once you're in the kitchen, you'll turn left, and at the end of the room there's a door that leads to a breezeway that was basically used for storage. And in front of that door was another door for the stairs to the house. Well, I walked up the stairs, and the door to the breezeway was right in front of me. Now the door was just any normal house door. It has a plastic window that covers the top half of the door with the thinnest curtain I've ever seen covering it. Well, looking through that window, I saw a couch right in front of it and decided that's where I was going to sleep for the night. I closed the door behind me and lay down where I could see the door. Now remember that the door led to the kitchen light was always on, and the thin curtain didn't stop really any of it. About 15 minutes of lying there with my eyes closed, and I had this weird feeling to just open my eyes, and when I did, I just couldn't move. Standing directly on my stomach was a pure black being. The thing looked exactly like if you took a model of a graybeard from Skyrim and put the blackest black in existence all over it. I could make out a good and everything. Looking at this thing for about a minute, I noticed that there wasn't any light from the kitchen that got through it, and it wasn't transparent at all, but I didn't feel any weight where it stood. I looked at it for about 10 minutes before I just passed out. The next experience I had was at 11 in Alabama, and I had already lived there for about a year and was planning on moving to a house just down the street. I had to watch the house by myself while my parents and siblings were getting the new house ready. I was playing something on my PS3 in the living room. The TV I was playing on was big, but it wasn't modern. It didn't have HDMI, so I was using the old reliable AV plugs. This TV was also old enough that it made the loud static noise if there was no input. Well, I was sitting there by myself just gaming out when all of a sudden the static screen cut in louder than it should be. It took me a minute to notice, but within the static I could hear the words "get out," and it kept getting louder and louder until I turned off the TV and just waited for my parents. I didn't spend another night there. Well, I moved back to my grandparents about a year after living at the new place, so I was about 12 now. Well, this time I shared a room with my cousin that was down the hallway I mentioned in the layout. I slept on the floor facing the door, and my cousin slept on his bed. That was also facing the door just a little bit. The door to the room had little spaces between the door frame to let in a little light if the hallway light was left on, but I can also see in the dark pretty well. Well, there was this one night that I couldn't sleep, so I opened my eyes, and just like in the breezeway, I could see, like, a completely black figure in the middle of the room, except this time there were 2. It seemed to be a little boy and a little girl. I couldn't make out too much about the boy, but I could tell the girl had on a dress and had pigtails in her hair. I would see these things every night for about 3 months before I asked my cousin if he saw them too. He said he did, but he just ignored it. He also told me stories of having friends come over and sleep in the downstairs living room, with them waking up at night and seeing one of my grandma's life-size dolls walking around. Well, I never told anyone he told me that story, but it got told by multiple family members saying they've seen the same thing. Now fast forward a year, and I'm 13. The breezeway was cleared out, and I made it into my own room. My grandparents had bought me a futon to sleep on, but I wasn't their favorite kid, so they didn't buy me a nice one. This thing was basically cardboard with an inch of foam padding on top, and when I lay down on it, it stopped at my knees. It was also hollow inside and only had a thin piece of cloth stapled around the bottom to keep it closed. Well, one night I was lying down trying to get some sleep, and I was in the position of laying your head on your right arm to sort of make a pillow. Well, after about 30 minutes of sleep, I started to feel movement under my arm where my head was. It's like there was something in the futon scratching at it. I spent 10 minutes lying like that thinking, why is this happening? Before I hopped up and turned on the light, I immediately flipped the futon over, and all of the staples were where they were supposed to be, but I tore it open, and there was nothing there. With how intense the scratching was and how long it lasted, I was sure there was something inside. I could feel the futon move up under my arm, but there was nothing there. I moved back to Alabama for about 2 years after that one, but nothing really happened. And after the 2 years were up, I was back to living at my grandparents', but they didn't live there anymore, they just rented the house out to family. Over time I would see shadows move and walk around the place, but I still had no idea what was going on. When I was about 16, I discovered the Darkness Prevails channel, and it got me really interested and helped me explain at least a few of the things that happened to me over the years. I learned about shadow people and cryptids and basically the whole lot. While I stayed at my grandparents' house, I would always see shadow people moving around the house, and I learned to ignore them. This next one happened when I was about 17. Still living at my grandparents'. I know I didn't mention this before, but it's in a city. I still didn't have a car, so I would walk to work and back every day. It was about a 40-minute walk. I would usually get off sometime between 10 and 11 and walk home alone. About 10 minutes into the walk, I always come across this area that has no street light, you just have to hope a car passes, and it's kind of a busy street, so you don't have to worry too much. On the opposite side of the sidewalk, there is a chain-link fence, and on the other side, the ground drops straight into a tiny creek. Well, I'm walking one summer night, and I get to the slot. All of a sudden, for reasons I can't explain, I decide to stop walking and look straight up. About the stories above me. There is a dark mass with a bright blue ring of light under it. This thing was massive. I don't know how no one else saw it, but it didn't make a single sound. After about 30 seconds of looking at it, it just zipped off into the night. It still didn't make a single sound as it went, and it was the fastest thing I'd ever seen. But every now and then I do see the sky light up blue for a second at night. This next story isn't really one of my own, but I probably caused it. I was living in another part of a city, and I had a friend that lived about a 15-minute walk away. They were over at my apartment and hung out until about 1 in the morning. I offered to walk her home, and at this point in time I listened to storytellers like Darkness Prevails all the time, and my favorites are the cryptid stories. On the walk to their place, this got brought up, and so did skinwalkers. They kept saying it over and over, and eventually I started to after I reminded them that saying the name attracts them. Well, that goes on for the whole walk, and when it's time for me to walk back to my place alone, I just have this odd feeling of being watched. I just chalked it up to too many stories and tried to take my mind off it, but even when I was home, I didn't feel right. The next morning I woke up to a barrage of texts from my friend telling me to call them or come over. I decided just to walk over, and they were freaking out when I got there. They said that at about 6 in the morning, when their dad got up from work, he looked out the glass sliding doors that led to the backyard and saw the most hideous thing he'd ever laid eyes on, trying to hide behind one of the trees. Their dad is a 50-year-old, white, old-fashioned man and had never heard of any other cryptid besides, like, Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. There was no way he would just lie about something like that. And it was all a big coincidence that he saw it just a few hours after I walked them home, and he was asleep when we got there.